Happy Holy Day, Moors. Welcome to the House of Reawakening Minds. House of Reawakening Minds exists to provide for exploration and practice of spirituality in an enlightened community dedicated to honoring the myriad of sacred pathways to the universal creator. We are a holistic center for spiritual grounding, free thought, self-discovery, and of course, Moorish science, an awakening experience for all ages. Tonight, we are pleased to have with us once again and happy for all of you who have traveled from far and near for our very own Grand Sheik, Taj Tarik Bey. Let's receive him.
One of the things that I want to talk, and this is redundant, and I find this very often necessary. I was in Trenton actually Saturday with a very large body of Asiatics and scholars and teachers. Surprisingly, the person they sent the limo to pick me up at the train station, and the brother I was telling him, actually Dr. Nailah, the brother that picked me up forgot past events, although he's familiar with me, right? Now, it was he, and I'm finishing telling you, W. Ports Day, who was with me and Grand Sheik Sharia when we went to actually Newark, New Jersey to visit one of the last Grand Sheiks to walk with the Prophet. And he's the one that gave me a lot of the history and information. That's the first time I met him, actually. And the last time. We had, they used to have Moorish balls every year. And we went to a Moorish ball in Trenton, and then we went to Newark, New Jersey to visit him. And he's the one that gave me an old copy of Moorish Temple of Science, Moorish Holy Temple of Science, and the Moorish Science Temple bylaws together. And also with locations of temples named of those who headed the different temples, etc. And he always wore, as I knew and as I saw him, complete Moorish garb. And when we were leaving, and this is the interesting thing, W. Ports Bey, who picked me up at Trenton, was with me then. And that was one of my hard lessons of learning some of the history of the movement. Anyway, when I was leaving, we were leaving because we were coming back to Camden area. And and so I thought he was talking to Brother Walter, He said, no, you. So he took me in the back, and he had curtains in the back to his office. And he went in his drawer, and he gave me his own Quran. He gave me the charter, took it off the wall in the frame, and gave it to me. And he gave me the bylaws, and he talked with me for about an hour. And he said, I know you're going to do something with it. And it was shortly after that when I founded the round table. First time I met him, last time. But anyway, the brother would pick me up, and he forgot. I took him back to the history. Wow, man, I forgot. You remember all that? Yes, I do. Anyway, jurisdiction, and one of the reasons why, and this is redundant because we always do something on jurisdiction naturally, because essentially that's what you're dealing with. But I want to remind you all that jurisdiction affects every stage of your life and everything that you do. And what I recognize by talking to different people around the country, and particularly people who are beginning to get some of the information but are still locked in dogma and get very sensitive. People that are locked in dogma are very sensitive when you deal with knowledge. They think it's the devil, stuff like that. They really do. It's unfortunate, but true. Our people are obsessed with devils. And that's true. And you'll discover that. I wasn't surprised. I was a little disappointed in this brother because he's a so-called scholar. But didn't surprise me. you start getting deep into knowledge and dealing with things that rock the boat, and they start getting dizzy. And they be looking for a demon in you, it's really in that. You know, if you observe it. And the interesting thing, the more and more you study and deal with people around the country, and you deal with some people like outside of this country, you will discover, now my rude awakening was actually earlier when I was younger, but as I got older, it's like, it doesn't surprise me, if you understand, but I like to be reminded, because I was growing up, I was naive, always look for the good in everyone, if you get the point. And when you get involved in different organizations and with different people, and then you deal with the general problems of our people having broken families, women being abused, struggling, trying to raise children, have the men in jail or kind of messed up, whatever, and the general dynamics that we deal with. And when you start going into the social engineering, really, and start doing cross-checking, people who you think would want to fix this stuff, that either in church, mosque, synagogue, and always talk about Jesus, God, Allah, and salvation, and you start dealing with the real problems and dealing with solutions, some of these people you expect to be ready to jump on the information to get something done, they start getting starry-eyed and dizzy and judgmental, and you want to see some demons, that's where you'll find them. And it used to disappoint me when I was younger, but while I grew up and recognized that the masses don't get religion, they get dogma. Problem is the masses don't know that. Because when you get into scholarship, you find out your biggest demons are in the places where you least expect them. No different than if someone who's a fur trapper, you know, if you're selling mink coats, you're not going to set a trap out here, you know, on Vanderbilt and Pine. You're going to set it right in the woods, right where all the animals feel safe near their homes. And what I discovered, rude when I was young, but as I grew up, you know, I began to accept that reality. Yeah, in the churches, mosques, and synagogues, right where that's where them demons are. And it doesn't mean all of them, because most of the people are honorable. It's the one with leadership. You know what I mean? Standing behind the pulpit. You know, because you know they're scholars. You know, when someone who's learning or someone who's just naively sincere, they may be in denial about certain truths because they're finding a comfort zone. But it's sort of like, you know, being a house doctor or contractor, I understand certain fundamental building principles. So someone who does that work can't BS me. They can get over on someone who doesn't know the work. They ain't getting over on me. Nor would I get over on them, if you get the whole point. But what you discover is that when you're in private conversations with most of these people who are in positions of power, and you start talking about the real problems of the world and their real sources, they'll admit to you everything. And then the next breath tell you the people ain't ready for it. And then go to them same people and collect tithe and collect all kind of finance and start talking about what the devil did to everybody, and know daggone well it's a man with 2 feet and 2 hands that's doing 90% of all this stuff to all of humanity. And it ain't no mystery devil nowhere. It's a tool that the priesthood used to keep the masses under control. Not that there's no negative spirit out there, but you know, most people that get caught into that ain't paying attention to the guy that just stole your bike that's running down the street. And ain't no devil and took it. And when the IRS comes to take your stuff, it ain't Satan that came and took your stuff. It's some European foreigner pretending to be American who's continuing the Spanish Inquisition, who was robbing you and claiming that the devil did it and you went along with the program. Then they have overseers in your community in the name of Jesus, God, Allah, who keep you calm and passive while they come along with shears and shear all your hair off. Jesus and Allah and Muhammad to come give you a new sweater one of these days. And it goes from generation to generation to generation to generation, to the point now The children don't even have faith in their adults, family anymore. They love them, but they don't even trust them. You know what I mean? And so they're trying to survive the best they can with the limited knowledge that they have, and are dying younger and younger because they don't have enough knowledge in life to survive. And everybody's telling them about salvation and prayer, and all they see is misery, death, drugs, broken family, and jail. But they saved. Again, was, in their imagination until they start getting real. And recognizing that, this mystery kingdom of God that all these opportunists keep telling them about is right here on this planet. It ain't in no cloud. The kingdom is on earth. And so the intelligence is that you're going to have to learn how to govern this earth, because this is where your experience is. And that doesn't mean that does not mean you're not being moral, because you're being realistic, if you get the point. Because most of the people that do stuff to you are people who claim beliefs in gods. So don't get twisted with that. But again, we want to talk jurisdiction. And as myself and Dr. Nailah was talking earlier, because we were talking when I mentioned to her subject matter, because she keeps me on point with a lot of things, because she's a writer herself, and then she's kind of psychic, even though she doesn't admit it. I see it. So I can tell her a little bit stuff, and she'll finish the sentence type thing, so I already know where she's at. But the deal of it is, so she says, didn't we go over those matters not too long ago? I said, well, yeah. Now, Saturday, as an example, when they picked me up in Trenton at the Riverline, I asked the brother, I said, because I knew I was going to deal with a large body of people, scholars, a couple of writers, people from different organizations, and there was a lot of new women there with children. And I was asking, because I hadn't dealt with some of these people, so I'm going to the center. And so I asked them, did they have any studies in jurisdiction? Because the subject matter was in relationship to the people, are you ready for power? Are you ready to take power? Now, so that was the presentment that the people who brought me out there asked me to deal with. So logically, I automatically understand from the concept of the people, because it was also a large Kwanzaa celebration. Ron Karanga set that up. Now, I talked to him years ago at Temple University, so he already knows what's up. So meanwhile, I'm going through all the ritual with everybody, and I'm appreciating it, particularly with little children. So after they went through the things, and I told them what the candles really meant. But I wouldn't want to bust their bubble. But I already know that Ron knows those are the, 7 ruling planets, symbolic. Whether you're dealing in the book of Revelation with Yahshua, who they renamed as Jesus as a password, because they don't want the people to really know that the one they call Jesus is Yahshua ben Yosef, that he was Moabite, and his grandmother was Moabite, and that he was Muslim and Yahudi, or was falsely called Jew, and that he spoke Aramaic, and also that he died on that cross. His body right now is in Sringar, Sindh, what you call Hindustan, in a gold vault, actually, like you see your king-size beds, well, the tomb is like larger than that, but on the same principle with the 4 pillars on 4 corners, and it's glass on all sides, and then it's another glass inside, and his body's in there, and it's pretty much preserved as mummified. And his skin is a little darker than mine, but we look like family, if you want to know. And the whole world knows that, except the people here who think human beings are crayons, because they've been taught by Rome, and they worship a Roman and be going hallelujah to you, and it's Jesus. It ain't even a J in Hebrew. It's a password. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a password. Now, but knowing that and knowing know this information to get their LLDs, their doctorate degrees, meaning anybody does it's available to anybody. Meaning anybody does research, you can find it anywhere. but most people would rather deal with what persons in robes tell them without doing any research themselves, or trusting that this person that's standing before you in a robe is lying his butt off, meaning that he does not live what he's promoting. That's a money maker for him. In other words, he's sucking the widow's pennies, while he himself believes nothing that he's saying. Not that everything he's saying is a lie. It's just misrepresented. Do you understand? Now, Brahmic priests, people, select people, just say select people, in your highest degrees of Shriner in Masonry, limited persons, limited in on the light side of Illuminati. Some, yes, mostly Brahmin priests. It would be more or less in that area. To see the body of the Nazarene. But it's not unknown. That's the point that I'm making to you. And he also had children, and a brother, and a wife. You know, these things are known by scholars, but if they tell the people the truth, the game that all these houses have been telling for generations will collapse overnight. And then these people, you know, all starry-eyed wouldn't buy them $60 million planes to go take the word over someplace else and be taking care of them and have them building all these complexes with these people in debt and mortgages up to their necks for generations that they never pay for. And the houses are always leaking, and they always got a building fund. And if you challenge these people to really do research on the one they call Jesus, immediately, as soon as they start doing the research, they'll close the books because it crushes everything that they believe, because they don't want to deal with the facts, they only deal with beliefs. That would be called jurisdiction. Even like another fact that we were talking about earlier, right? Like say if you're a Brahmin priest, right? And remind us of this. All of your ancient gods were females anyway, so let's get over all the other stuff that, you know, the games that we play today. Now that's the truth. And even the names, Elohim, which is Hebraic, you know, it's not Hebrew, it's Hebraic, means mother, father. It's a duality name. Allah is strictly and absolutely feminine. Elohim, Elah, Allah is also feminine. But we don't need to go there. I'm just throwing these things out to you to demonstrate jurisdiction. Your ancient pharaohic creed, aside from what they show you in history books, are female. And that's the truth. And most of your images of the sons of the mother, this is where you get May, sun, Re, Ma, and son, or Isis and Horus on her knee. And then the Constantinians duplicated with this image that they call Mary and Jesus, which is contemporary, and that goes back thousands of years before that time even appeared. It's a duplication. So the power of divine governing structured for ruling purposes, you know, because much of the social engineering that is done has more to do with mental midgetry and control systems, not real spirituality or real love for humanity or real love for fixing anything, but more for keeping certain men who are 90% of them corrupt in power. And to protect their power, this is the major reason why, not only, but the major reason why most people in power belong to secret societies. And this is so that the truth can be dispensed to them at high cost, high degree, with death oaths not to reveal the secrets to the masses. And this is how they rule the masses, by simply miseducating the masses and keeping the real ancient disciplines and knowledge from them. It's just that's what it is, and that's who they are, and that's how things roll. This is why a lot of times when you have a venue like this where people come, scholars come here to the House of Reawakening Minds and share information with you that usually would be preserved among Masons, Eastern Stars, Illuminati, Daughters of the American Revolution, Caicos, the High Priesthood, the Brahma Priests, Grand Sheiks, Sheikesses, etc., people of the Attic Chamber. That's why most of them people get mad at us. Because what happens when you bring the knowledge to the common people, you liberate them from them, not from some mystery demon that, you know, that they think is going to do something to you. It starts liberating you from them who've been doing stuff to you. They're just kind of hiding. They hide behind institutions. You know what I mean? Hide behind their JOBs and, oh, the devil over there. And if it wasn't for the devil, you'd have a peanut butter sandwich tomorrow. But give me $5 right now. Because so I can go tell somebody else about the peanut butter sandwiches that the devil's stealing from you. And they're going eating peanut butter steak sandwiches and you trying to struggle to feed your babies, thinking that he's giving Jesus half. Whatever. You know, this game's been going on for so long and it's really disgusting. Because the more you study, the more you find out that the major problems of the planet and humanity come from the priesthood themselves. And you're looking exactly in the opposite direction for some demons being, oh, that's the shadow. Oh, the devil. Oh, what's the shadow behind that star? Oh, whoa, the star was behind the cloud and the moon came. Whoa, you know, everybody's scared and hide behind trees. And it's really that guy standing right over there boasting about his personal phone call to Jesus, God, Allah, Moses, Muhammad. And it don't mean that all these people are corrupt. I'm not saying that. I understand the majority of them are. And the majority of them are liars. And that's the truth. And the majority of them are in it for the finance, they're in it for saving no humanity. Now, I'll say if I was presenting to you as a reporter, you're a reporter, being objective. Yeah. I don't care whether you claim to be Muslim, Christian, Jew, we ain't getting into that. That's not even unbiased. Just looking at the evidence. You're a scientist, right? And then you two are there assisting her to keep her head straight, so she don't start putting her biases in there. So you all do backup notes. Then we all bring the notes together. Then you all make no decision. Then this group of scientists, examine their notes to keep the bias out, and then make an honest report on the evidence. Without the game of what you believe, what does the evidence say? And if you could get people to start looking at everything like an honest reporter, 90% of what you've been told in school and what you've been told every day in these different organizations would collapse and fall apart. Half of it would be totally discarded, the other half would be cleaned up. And your whole culture would change. Within 2 months, you'd have more finance in your pocket because they wouldn't be taking it. You immediately, the same thing women do in general, how they run hospitals, schools, and most jobs and government, and yet you get paid less, and some of them think that, how could we do this and how could we fix this in the community? Because they've got this mental subordination to all these guys with these degrees, when actually they're the ones that's always been doing the work. You want to go to the hospital and get well? Be glad when the doctor came in real quick and left. And the nurses are here. Now I'm going to cure her. Because they're the ones that fix everything. But the point that I'm making is that people who really do things rarely get the credit. And sometimes over generations, they start actually believing themselves that they're not the ones doing this stuff. So I'm only saying some of this, rambling on with some of this to appeal to you to respect your divine thinking. Respect yourself. Divine, don't doubt yourself, and don't doubt your first mind, and don't reject it. Don't hesitate to challenge anything. Don't accept what we're saying, examine what we're saying. You know. And Dr. Nailah, we were talking earlier, and this point was part of our conversation. Because when we were talking, we never get a chance to finish because we're always doing stuff, right? If I'm talking to you, yourself, you're a rabbi, right? and you're a bronze priest, right? And you're a high bishop in the bishopric, and you're a chancellor in the order of Thule, right? And she's an Eastern Star, highest degree matron, right? And say you're a Shriner, right? 96 degrees, forget 33, right? And you're Grand Dragon of the Kylos, Ku Klux Klan, Circle of the Light, right? Brotherhood, etc., right? And then you're a member of the DAR. Now, in your deepest chambers, I already know that all of y'all got a Moorish fez. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Dressed in jewels or some kind of format, even while 90% of you are pretending that you don't know that these people out here with all these economic and political problems are descendants of the ancient Moabites. They're Moors. The same bloodline of the one they call Jesus, and yet they're looking at some Roman. They don't even know their own bloodline. You know, and all messed up, everybody taking advantage of them. They got a lot of beliefs, no knowledge, a lot of beliefs. It's costly too. And if you ask them to solve problems, can't solve no problems. But they saved though. So our issue is jurisdiction. So 90% of any prayers that 90% of any of them make, they will end that prayer with Amen, right? Right? Now I just want to, because this is jurisdiction, keep that in mind, right? And you can interject, Dr. Nailah, if you choose to, right? 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 So, the priests don't want to tell them that. Right? So they got, what, about 77 different sects in Islam. And Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, said there shall be no secularism in Islam. Right? Right? So Yashir, who was an Essene and a Gnostic, right? When the Romans murdered him, they started lying to him and say he was a Constantinian. If Yeshua greeted you, he'd say, Assalamu alaikum. That's his greeting. Aramaic. Now, of course, the reason why the preachers won't say that, because if they said that in church, half them people would be running out the door and say, oh, what you trying to say? He's a Muslim, huh? They'd be, oh, you got a devil and stuff. You know, they'd be really kind of upset. But yet, that's the truth. And provable. It's not even a secret outside of these gates and outside of the priesthood. And the very ones who would attack would be the ones who've been boasting how much they love them. They got a personal relationship. I got a direct iPhone account with Jesus. And it go with all that kind of stuff. I think I gave 10,000 just this year in tithe. Because they don't admit tithe means Roman tax. They've been paying Rome. Now, everybody knows this, but I'm just saying that to demonstrate jurisdiction. Jurisdiction is the distinction and the protectorate positive law principle of protecting the integrity of this on here. Does this now become the table?
No.
Or this bench?
No.
I stick this in here. Does that become this bowl?
No.
Jurisdiction is always making the discernment between the integrity of anything that is from anything that is also but is not it. Are we clear? It's basic divine thinking, basic divine reasoning. Thus, jurisdiction is applied in human experience deliberately so that those who rule can maintain the integrity of things, of being, of discretion. You can call it discretion. It's like, say, for instance, we don't make Kool-Aid, right? So you got Kool-Aid and you take a little powder, don't make it artificially sweetened, whatever, and you throw it in a glass, right, and you pour some water and you start, you know. You know, maybe the cake mixer, you know. But anyway, and then you got Kool-Aid, right? But you don't want it mixed all the time, right? Jurisdiction is always being aware of the distinction between two elements that at any time may mix or cross over or be in the company of another. Are we clear? Are we clear? Now, as an example, like say we're in this building, right? And so this is the house of reawakening minds. At this time, this is the cover for this institution, right? Now, in some institutions, they may have where women sit on one side and men sit on the other side. Those would be called jurisdictions. Are we clear? Now, and like we often use in the nature of government, like, or say, on this side, one of you at any particular time is chosen as mother of the house. And so that everyone that's sitting on this house would be represented as your children. Now, sometimes you're grappling with these over here, and the same principle goes over here, and now when it's time to go or tally the record and everything, you got to call your children back. She got to call her children back over here. That same principle applies in nativity. The nativity is actually dealing with the placenta, the umbilical cord, the navel, life, the mother and son, etc. principle expanded in the family of nations. The same rules apply. They're not complex. Don't make them complex. Whenever the nation's in trouble or the house is tore up, you say, all right, mom's here, clean up, you got to fix up. All your children love y'all and everything. Get out the refrigerator. Go home to your mother. And, you know, I'm not going to judge what's in your mother's jurisdiction. That's her door. I may not like it, but that's her door. But in this house, we straightening this stuff up. In world politics, that's called nationalization. Are we clear? Now, I need you to understand this because it's important. Because they're being addressed on the world stage if you don't understand that that's taking place. And we have been the least competent in this area. However, over the last couple of centuries, we've been the food for the large jurisdiction of political operations on the planet, or what you would call the major food line or the major source of energy for colonial operations that you've been calling racism and prejudice, which is a cover argument, which is not the issue. It's a diversion argument. The issue is that you're under European colonial occupation and been suffering under the Christian black codes, enforced under the Spanish Inquisition for hundreds of years, and it's been disguised in government in order to hide its operation from you, with people look like you who are paid, usually 32, 33 Masons, and usually Reverend, etc., to keep you calm while you get raped, while in secret they're taking payoffs. And that's how this thing has really worked, even if it's uncomfortable to you. It's the truth. Now, that's a jurisdiction. Are we clear? The opposing side to that for your liberation is also a jurisdiction. Are we clear? Are we clear? You as a mother pulling your child out of a negative situation is pulling them out of a jurisdiction into another jurisdiction. And jurisdiction does not always mean distance. Just like foreign does not always mean distant. And you must get this clear. Please write that down. Foreign does not always mean distance, and often doesn't mean distance. But the average person being educated under the Rockefeller systems actually start getting in their mind foreign. They start thinking going miles and miles into some other land. Are we clear? So now one of the things that I used to do body work too, like cars and stuff like that. And so I still get magazines, you know, in the mail. And I was looking at a magazine today. I won't give them free advertisement because they'll be looking at the stuff in China next week. But I was reading an article, and the first paragraph really caught my eye, and I was going to actually print it out and make that part of the conversation tonight. And just for the sake of argument, if the writer recognizes me talking about him, so be it. And you can contact the House of Reawakening Minds later if you want to. Well, I'll straighten him up a little bit. But the writer was Mexican. And I didn't finish reading the articles, because the first paragraph got me. But it shows you how the mind control works. And he says, I am of Mexican descent, and I'm working, he's writing for the magazine, for sort of magazine. And he said, and so I was coming back and forth, you know, to America to work, you know, because, you know, some of the oil companies have stuff on both sides. And he was talking about, and my first experience with Americans, blah, 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 you know, so immediately, if you're teaching a child jurisdiction, that would be a perfect paragraph to show you that here's a Mexican who is American, making reference to foreign Europeans who occupying our land in North America as the American, and he's acting like an immigrant to America, because he don't know the difference between America, which is a continent, thinking that the Europeans who have been falsely calling themselves Americans and getting away with it, that he's an American, and that the Mexican is looking at himself as being in another country, as if he don't know about Queen Khalifa, and which includes California, Nevada, part of Colorado, New Mexico. All of that is Mexico, and all of the continent from the South, Chile, up to Greenland is America. And here's a Mexican. Now at least he's Mexican. At least you know that, you know. But the Asiatics here don't even know they're Americans. They're convinced that the Europeans brought them here in the ship, 1655, 1555, good ship Jesus, and they're home. And the European makes fun of them with the Wizard of Oz. Dorothy, you're home. You know, so he can get away with saying, well, we told you so. But you already know later on when they figure this stuff out, they start chirping Reverend Jones for having lied to him. When he found out that Reverend Jones was waiting for Rome, not with Jesus, a lot of these people gonna be lynched. You know, and he's gonna say, well, we told you, see right here, and see, because the Lord made us, you know. You get off, because these people all knew all the time. You know, so many people have been sucking off of our people for so many generations. It's almost like if you try to liberate our people, they want to stab you. Because they think you got a devil, you going against God, because Reverend Pigfoot, I just paid for his $50 million plane, and you're going to try to tell me? And they start that stuff, and I rebuke you, and start banging you side of the head with books and stuff. They will. You know, you'd be surprised how, you know, quickly people can go into this demon spell thinking that they're being spiritual. But that's jurisdiction. Knowing, because some of you know, but some don't, that the economic system, operative economic system of Great Britain in the contemporary world, and the whole of European nations that they mislabel as Western nations, which is another birthright theft issue. Their whole economy is for the most part rooted in the U.S. T-bonds that were created mostly in 1868, mostly in 1868, and the initial ones in 1861, 1861, U.S. Treasury bonds, which is also why the people of Asiatic African descent don't know they're Asiatic, hate their African heritage, but wonder why they never got 40 acres and a mule, because they don't know the history. And the bond system was made on all the wealth of these peoples whose lands were stolen by the Jesuit order through their secret Treaty of Verona, etc. And the commercial mercenary war, which they falsely list in history as the Civil War, and that's what they created the UST bonds with, that are sold from 55 Water Street in New York and sold around the world, that makes the foundation of the Western world's stock market. And then other instruments that were made on top of them as time passed makes up the economy that is operative today, that's folding up. Right? Now, this is not unknown information. However, most of our people who like to say they believe in the system will deny this information even though it's provable, because they've been party to it by claiming some spiritual connection to the institutions here that actually have been destroying our family, including the Christian black codes that came directly from the Church of Rome, that our people keep lying and say came from Jesus, and they funded themselves to the point of, I think, the last report when we was doing the radio show years ago when they was talking about the black hair business, so remember in Philly, they estimated just on the East Coast, the so-called black church gave up over $9 billion and have nothing to show for it, but they want to march against the Asiatics who are selling them, you know, hair products and braids and wigs and stuff, because they won't do these things themselves. And they were protesting in Philly about boycotting Asiatic stores who controlling the $9 billion black hair business. And but anyway, the report was, when it all came out, that because the Asiatics, you know, they did a report, because one of the boycotts they had was on 52nd and Girard Avenue against the Asiatics. But they did a report, and you know, the report was over $9 billion is given just on the East Coast to the churches, and they have nothing to show for it. And the report was, they do what they want to do with their money. You know, you all choose to make churches and bars. We have churches and bars, but we don't wear a chip on our shoulder. You know, we serve the community. We're serving you with good prices, and you want to argue with us. You all choose not to deal with national principles or international law. That's a choice. That's a choice. It's not that you don't have finance. You choose to do what you do. We choose to do what we do. And it's unfair for you to try to act like we're taking anything out of your communities. We're contributing to your communities, because you won't deal with these principles. You know, if we didn't do it, you certainly wouldn't do it. That stopped that race argument that they was, because they was blasting that on URD. Do you remember that about 9 years ago?
Big time.
Yeah. Oh man, that was like horrible. That's jurisdiction.
It's embarrassing.
Oh, it was horrible and embarrassing. And all them so-called black leaders, they got together, businessmen, they was blasting this stuff on the radio for months. And I was doing the show with Sabir in Philly. And, you know, we wouldn't go along the program. They didn't like us, because I wasn't playing that stupid game. Because I already knew, had them guys, including the owners, they're all Masons. They already know what the deal is. You know, they feeding into that old black game, knowing that that takes these people's birthright, but, you know, they acting like they care for God. It's sickening. Jurisdiction. Now, I'm going to read, this is a synopsis of the definition of jurisdiction. And because we're going to deal with the political aspects of it. Jurisdiction, and of course that's a noun, essentially, part of speech. It is the lawful right to exercise official authority. Are we clear? This is one of the natures of jurisdiction, right? And it is in relationship to structured government, whether you're dealing with the executive branch of government, the legislative branch of government, etc., or the judicial branch of government, including what you would call the one supreme court from which the principle of jurisdiction in a governing body is derived and preserved, and then by delegated authority and limited certification issued in the different other jurisdictional areas of the corporate states, your subdivisional, what is called your inferior court systems, where the original jurisdiction remains supreme, and then the supreme above that remains with the people. Are we clear? So even when you understand the fundamental principles of government and government structure, that the right, the sovereign right, is a divine right from the creative mother or the universe, whether you call it Jesus, God, Allah, you may give it all kinds of names, but the divine origins of life itself. So government exists only on one cause and purpose. Government only exists to preserve rights that already exist divinely with you. Are we clear? Outside of that, government has no purpose to exist with you. This is another reason why it's important to understand jurisdiction. Are we clear? Also, why I'm addressing it, because of the estate issues that are going on in the political forum. Dr. Nailah, give her the mic, please.
Islam.
On
the subject of jurisdiction and government that you're just speaking of, last night I was listening to, or this morning, probably around 2 o'clock, a gentleman on one of the radio shows, talk radio shows, and he was bringing up the fact that in Switzerland, he said, who knows who the president of Switzerland is? He said, nobody knows who the president of Switzerland is. He said, Switzerland is probably one of the most successful countries there is because they don't major in a political leadership. There may be someone who's over something, but he or she is so in the background because it is really about, as you said, the overseeing the rights of the people, or assuring, not overseeing, assuring that the rights of the people.
And that would be called an office of trust. And this is, again, in governmental structure, to understand those jurisdictional limitations, or what delegation of authority orders are in their nature of government, because it is in this area where most of the problems economic exist or have their origin and functional maintenance in North America. And when you're going among our people in different organizations, they're always talking about, in one way or another, self-determination, self-governing, nation of this and nation of that, and nationality, and birthright. And if you test these people, they have limited knowledge in these matters while they hear these things all the time. And when it comes to the economic problems that we have, they don't relate these things to birthright because they don't, it's usually miscategorized. And they're usually, will get into an emotional, opinionated triad of rabble that has really limited connection to the real issue of jurisprudence. Although a lot of people talk about that, so we'll start talking about racism and somebody wanted me to have a job and we was marching and we're going to make them respect us, things like that. But when it really boils down, you're dealing with jurisdictions and have no knowledge, no teaching about jurisdiction, no civil instruction whatsoever, tons of opinion. They'll have people who know these things, who have them marching all over the place, making fools of themselves and making a lot of people wealthy. And then talk about self-determination, and you test these people on fundamental governmental structure, they only know the basics of civics that should be taught to a third grader. And again, this is why we're dealing with jurisdiction. And not because it's just a point of interest, is because these people have no idea I would say they have no idea. They're not connected to the things that they're seeing going on today with Putin, Trump, the United States Service Corporation, the stock market, the closing of the United States government, all of these things that they think is something else is totally, absolutely connected, absolutely to their birthright. And most people are talking that abstract as if what they're doing has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with you. Everything to do, and including the fact that he's not your president, not that he's good or bad, and the fact that they don't even know that. You understand what I'm saying to you? And that's not a negative statement, that's a true statement. You know, because they don't know the difference between the private corporation of the United States and the United States Republic that was overthrown in 1861, which they have their forefathers have treaty with that republic that was overthrown to enslave them. And they reject everything without knowing they have connection to it. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? And you're talking jurisdiction. So, again, with the liquidating of estates, which has been fundamental to the political operations and the economic system and to everything concerning the stock market, has nothing to put its way. The majority of the numerical activity taking place on the stock market has more to do with human capital than it has to do with physical product capital. And that human capital is these people called Negro, Black, and Colored, whether they claim to be Muslim, Christian, or Jew, whatever organizations they belong to, doesn't even matter. It's all built on their backs. And they're divided amongst each other, identifying with the organizations that they belong to and not with their pedigree or bloodline, which makes them politically powerless. This is again why we're dealing with jurisdiction, because we have been disconnected, psychologically disconnected by identifying with our clothes. Not that we shouldn't. Instead with our pedigree, and not knowing that the root of the economic power is in the pedigree. And this is again where anybody that deals with any level of scholarship already knows that the leadership is corrupt. As soon as they don't go there, if they're talking about the problems of people and never mention anything of what we just now said, another scholar, sociologist, engineer, anthropologist, historian, one who studies jurisprudence, know that person's a sellout. A person who doesn't know the rules, you know, or impressed how beautifully they said, you know, she's really racist. Oh, he said that. And they start clapping. Wow, say that again. Yeah, racist. Oh, and they get all excited and want to give him plaques and stuff like that. He's full of shit. Race is the human species. You know, another scholar looking at these people being played with. Race is the human species. The human species is broken up into large families called nations all over this planet. There's never been other than that. And nations have been sometimes rising against nations, stealing property from each other and stuff like that. And the rules are called international law to deal with these issues. Right? And anybody that's not on that platform logically doesn't have the venue by which to address their issues, which is why they have the people with the world's largest estate who have been robbed only dealing with Negro programs because they have no constitutional protection. And they don't know jurisdiction, so it doesn't dawn on them that they're being played with. Why? Because the leader of the marching order is, nice suit on. And he said, Jesus real good. And sometimes Allah. Oh, wow, he said that. Oh, it's deep. You know, people, you're looking at these people like with glorious eyes, and that's just a job for them. They're living off these people. Because if you ain't talking the nativity of these people, international law, constitution, and treaty protections, you ain't dealing with their economics. Stop lying. And 90% of these people got a 501c3 skull and bones kickback agreement, subordinate to a jurisdiction. And the daggone sure ain't Jesus. It's Rome. Why are they talking against Rome? They say because we are for God. And they don't even know God is generic. No, I'm just saying. So let's talk jurisdiction. Again, I want you to look at this honestly. Like, say if you look at the different concepts that the priesthood present to the masses in the name of gods, right? You'll see the general concept that there's no God but me, type thing, right? So therefore, the God but me, and we're arguing about the one God thing, right? Well, while we're arguing the one God thing, the God that you were just arguing about was if he's arguing about some other gods, how can he be the only one? Why would he bring it up? If there was no competition, and why are you upset and jealous? I mean, you know. Now a child could figure that out, but if one is caught up in, what you call dogma, without really looking at these things, you would just wash it out your mind and just accept everything blindly without examining what was just said to you. Not by somebody who's part of it or not part of it, just for what the evidence says. Right? And then in the next breath, they're saying Satan is God, now he's God. Well, what the hell? Who's running this thing? You know what I mean? And these are in all the books in general. But you know and I know that the average person does not have the courage to look at that information for what it's actually saying, because it destroys the imagery of their belief systems that they accept from the very books. Meaning the books themselves explain that there's something else more than what you're being told. You know, including, as a fact, you go to Septuaginta, right? And so, wait a minute, us, all right? Us, all right? This is only one. Well, the book said us. Well, see, you're not supposed to see that. Just give up your mind, you know. And all I'm saying is, when you look at facts as a reporter with no bias, one thing is very clear, that our concepts are clearly wrong even though we just accept things. And that those who are promoting those concepts without explanation have no honorable interest in the human development, spiritually or socially or politically. And isn't it interesting how they always end up with all the finance and all of the gods that they're always telling that's going to save you last week? He the only one gets the cash. And I think, now, if I'm telling a falsehood, please correct me. Feel free to grab the mic and correct me. Now, as understood, the Jesuit order, through the Secretary of Verona, and the members of the Circle Church of the Chancery on Fleet Street, England, under the Jesuit bishopric, with their subdivisional Knights of Malta, and Knights of Columbus, who's the collection arm for Keiko's Ku Klux Klan, generally control the printing press of the Federal Reserve Order that was set up in 13 and 16 at North America for subverting nations. Essentially setting up counterfeit private commercial paper, as it said in law, that has no value whatsoever, so that they would steal the gold and the silver coinage of nations around the world and then destroy them. Isn't it interesting how people are using Jesus, God, Allah, Moses, Muhammad, the Bible, Quran, and other books to collect this private commercial paper, and saying if you don't give some of this to God, then you're going to hell in the handbasket in the name of tithing? Now, isn't it interesting that a thinking person would recognize that any creator or that's above all this would not be submitted to the private foreign Jesuit order of the Federal Reserve, or he would send you to hell because you robbing him, then he's the God that so-called owns everything. All that's contradictory. And so you're not supposed to think like that, and people like me are not supposed to say those truths, because it kind of damages people's blind faith. And they want to be blind because they don't want to admit that Reverend Jones is a pimp. No, I'm being honest with you. But meanwhile, our families are still falling apart. The communities are being destroyed. They're being gentrified. IRS still takes our stuff, and we still lie to the next generation how saved they are, which is why they don't trust us anymore. That's jurisdiction. Fixing these things is jurisdiction. Jurisdiction is essentially the power to act, the power to do. the power to initiate with authority a claim of action that is recognized lawfully. Are we clear? A de facto position would be someone who takes that power or exercises that power would be called an. So in government, anyone who is given the jurisdictional power to exercise the power divine of a people in organized body politic would be what you call an officer of the jurisdictional delegated authority of one of the branches of government and would be certified accordingly. And the certified paper would be what is called a delegation of authority order. That's a jurisdiction. When that person steps outside or over the line of that limited delegated authority, that person at that time is called a traitor. Or someone who is, write this down, that would sedition, breach of trust, and treason. These things you must get used to associating yourself with mentally and politically very quickly, because all of these things are on your back right now. All these things are being projected at you as we speak. Before, but they're being accelerated. This is another reason why we're dealing with jurisdiction. And some of these things that I've said may appear on the surface not to be related, they're actually related. But what I want to do is try to share with you to broaden your mind on how you look at jurisprudence, how you look at jurisdiction. And keep this in mind, this is not new to you, but I want to remind you so that, you know, we can harmonize in what we're sharing tonight. You have air jurisdiction in the political arena, sea jurisdiction in the political arena, and land jurisdiction in the political arena. And you must understand that land jurisdiction deals with more than the aggregate dirt. Are we clear? It also deals with rights and liberties that are not immediately thought of by the average person, but is known by those who rule and govern. Are we clear? And because people are about their business living every day, they usually, unless they're being properly educated, don't extend their mind into the finite matters of everyday jurisprudence or the matters of governing and administrating estates. The fact that they have not been doing that has made a large hole opening in their education system by where people they have trusted have been systematically raping them for generations, and they don't know how to put it in check. It's another reason why we're dealing with jurisprudence and jurisdiction. Are we clear? Because also, as you're talking to different people that have a background and knowledge in jurisprudence, and you see certain statements they're making, you recognizing that they have a limited knowledge of jurisdiction because they're not automatically in their conversation you can read through, and they're thinking some of the standards of jurisdiction as per se for the being, you know, in personam jurisdiction, dealing with the being, the physical being, what they would call the individual being in personam jurisdiction of your person. In matters of someone in authorized position, which must be delegated, to regulate or to make judgment in matters concerning the self, and making that distinction from other personage, including corporate personage, which has been going on since 1868. You know, then you have subject matter jurisdiction. These are your different categories of subdivisional subject matters in whether you're dealing with states, lands, grants, contracts, treaty obligations, constitutional issues, diversity of citizenship, diversity of nationality, Article 3, court systems, international law issues of different nations, states, etc., that may be operative in certain territories that are outside of other jurisdictions, and the determinations that might be made through treaties and things like that. You're dealing with jurisdictions. And of course, when you get into that matter, that means you all could be sitting next to each other, all three of you, and that's not distance, but yet I could be dealing with three different jurisdictions. If you are national, you're Russian, and she may have raised her family in Russia, but she's Chinese. So both of you live in Russia, but you're Russian and she's Chinese, even though she may have been raising her whole family in China. Her children's would be under a naturalization jurisdiction, whereas your children would be a national jurisdiction, operating under some of the same laws, but certain things would be limited to her based on jurisdiction. Right? And then she may be now you have, so we're not dealing with distance, but we're dealing with jurisdiction, and we're dealing with principles of foreign persons. And so we would have, in any controversy concerning the states, laws, etc., lands, etc., although she raised her family in Russia, her family would not be able to own land necessarily in Russia, although they may have what you call deed control of lands for a certain period of time. She could never extract that land, nor could she enforce the Russian Constitution because she's not Russian. That's jurisdiction, even though she's been living there. These things must be understood by all of you because these things are going to have to be used by you to protect yourself, particularly what's on you right now if you didn't know it, if you get the point, and not get caught up in the false narratives that have been put out there, say with about Trump or about certain things that he's doing or saying, some dog and pony show type stuff that you hear. That's mostly diversion because of certain things that he's forced to have to do to try to fix things because it's really over for them in many areas, if you get the point, if they don't fix certain things. But meanwhile, it still boils down to, on another level, a lot of Europeans making arguments over an estate that still is not theirs. Because one, they're not Americans. Two, you're the American. Three, the estate of all this finance that's been moving around the world that you're looking at from a distance actually is from your estate that you didn't know that you had, which is why they keep our people dumb. Are we clear? And why most of your secret societies exist to keep you dumb. When almost all, as an example, and this is jurisdiction, a 133-degree Mason, upon recognizing that he was going to be neutralized, said, tonight I'm not fearing any man. Longevity has its place. I've been to the mountaintop, and I've seen the promised land. I might not get there with you, but we as a people will make it to the promised land. And people started clapping and everything. He was talking to the Jesuits. Although he was talking to his people, he was talking to the Jesuits. He'd been better off if he just came out and told these people bluntly, that great seal that you see on that dollar bill is yours. Y'all home. I'm getting tired of these people who I've been working with secretly, who's getting ready to neutralize me because I'm no longer useful. I'm a 33-degree Mason. I got a Moorish fez in secret. And this is your land. You're refugees in your own land. And I ain't taking the payoff no more. And they're thinking about getting rid of me, but I want you all to know that I was trying to be a good man when this all boils down, because you can't retract once the tag is put on you. Meaning that once Rome is done with you, you're neutralized. You understand what I'm saying? There is no retirement home for spies and overseers. Now, people who don't understand the real politics get caught up in the emotions of things and are not really looking behind the veil. They get caught up in personalities, and they get caught up in imagery. It is time for you not to play that game anymore. You know, to look through things, to take off your shades, to recognize with all due respect, no matter how many finances that you spend, that Santa Claus really ain't real. And isn't, you know, we can still light up things and stuff, that's cool, but Santa Claus ain't real. And get over it and start making priorities in your life. Start looking at priorities because you're going to need to. You know what I mean? Because they're going to shut you down before you get raised up. Some things are being fixed, but they're going to shut you down and hope that most of you don't survive it. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? So we're talking about jurisdiction, really, because everything that you're dealing with is a jurisdiction, including anything concerning extracting one national from the hands of a de facto governing political party or a de jure political party. Things that are in place, things that should have been in place, things that are by law put in place for such activities to take place that have not been taking place, and thus our people have been suffering on many levels because they do not understand jurisdiction. And then those who do have not been teaching it, although they've been profiting from you not knowing jurisdiction. Are we clear? So again, I use the different scenarios to give you an idea how simple it is, but how complex it can get when you stop thinking about it. All right? And one of the biggest misconceptions is people not understanding jurisdiction, the jurisdiction of foreign and foreigner, the jurisdiction of national and nationalization and naturalization. As an example, you know, like sometimes when you walk outside and the wind is blowing a little bit and something blows in your eye and you're doing like this, trying to clear something out of your eye, and that would be called a foreign object. But it's with you, isn't it? Mm-hmm. It's on you, isn't it? It's not distant, it's on you, but that would be called a foreign object. Are we clear? Mm-hmm. It is important, extremely important, for you, the people here sitting here, and those listening, to start getting it clear in your mind, very clear in your mind, making the discernment of jurisdictions. And although we have made the issue with you many times, we're going to make the issue with you again. Are we clear? One of the things I was thinking of doing, you know that map you got, Dr. Nailah? I was going to take the map. You got to spread it just to demonstrate. And we may do that in the future one time, just project it. Because it's clear that many of the people have been really under the mystery narrative of Frederick T. Gates and John D. Rockefeller of not knowing the distinction between continents and nation-state jurisdictions within the different continents. Not that they haven't heard these things, but there's no practiced knowledge displayed by the average person that has been educated in the Rockefeller institutions to demonstrate that they have over a fourth grade consciousness of geography. Certain things that are said in everyday language were actually designed to commit what is called cross-jurisdiction. And we do it linguistically every day and don't recognize the seriousness of it. It's again why we're doing jurisdiction. Go ahead.
When you
get in the mic.
When you bring that up, I've been trying to understand, now that I know that this entire continent is Africa, what's that? Why?
Northwest Africa.
Northwest Africa.
Northwest, now this is what it is. North America, Northwest Africa, Central America, old Central Africa, and then Southwest Africa is the lower part of the continent. And keep this in mind, all of it is one continent.
Well,
Although we say the Americas, when we're talking about Americana, so Americana are the islands on both sides in the Atlantis, and on the Pacific, that's Americana, and the whole continent is America.
So my question right now is, I've been trying to figure in my mind, why is this Trump wanting to cut our continent in half?
No, he doesn't. Now, yes and no. Now, let me explain something to you. You notice how they're beating up on Trump? Trump is doing a lot of things to teach you a lot of things if you pay attention. Trump is really not out to lunch. The people are out to lunch. They think Trump is out to lunch based on their own miseducation, by assumption. Now, I'm not defending Donald Trump, but knowing history and knowing geography, I look at him not probably the way that most people would. I look at him as like a political chess player. You understand what I'm saying? Things that he may say that doesn't make sense to the average person, it doesn't not because the average person is dumb, they're dumb to the truth of geography. They're dumb to the truth of politics. Like an example, I'll give you an example. Donald Trump, some abundance. We were just talking about you, Gary. What'd you bring us?
Some curry chickpea stew with sweet potatoes and some greens and cornbread and some raisins.
So translation, you showing off again, huh? Girlfriend can cook, boy. It's gonna drop sky now.
Thank you.
Anyway, recently, because it's all recent, because he's been in the corporate office, just coming into the second year. You gotta kind of know some of the politics. Now let's establish certain facts. All of the presidents that have been operating under the Queen's order at North America under the colonial operations, 43 of them are relatives. That's number one. Number two, all of them are Knights of Malta. Number three, Donald Trump is also a Knight Templar. Number four, putting these things in context, you must have a background knowledge on the dispute between the popes of Rome and Knights Templars. Five, knowing that Donald Trump is a made man, just like many others are, that sets up a foundation of heavy compromission at the same time in certain conflict of interest situations. Number six, 2013, the United States Corporation went bankrupt. Again. Number six. United States Service Corporation is the largest debtor corporation in the world that has been pretended to the public as being a country, which it is not, for the purpose of stealing the birthright of the true Al-Moroccans who think they're Negro, black, colored, and Indians, and Latinos, which is the real politics. The world knows that the legitimate government is a republic, with which the world's longest treaty on international law, still operative, exists, called the Treaty of Peace and Friendship between the Moroccan Empire and the United States, of which the people who are called Native American, Indians, blacks, colored, Latino, etc., all are different tags put on the heirs to the estate that Rome has controlled for the last couple hundred years, which is also referred to as the Great Seal. This is what it's referred to, phrase, the Great Seal and the Great Masonic Secret. And all of your secret societies are rooted around this whole paradigm. And the least ones that have the least amount of knowledge concerning these things are these people. There's generally no relationship in their mind whatsoever about what any of this stuff is. Not that they're intentionally negative, they just don't know politics. The other part is that those who really know are getting nervous because information is getting out that's waking them up. That area would be called waking the sleeping giant. Are we clear? Which is the area of information that we deal with, which is why a lot of people don't like us. Why? Because they've been living off of you for generations. And a lot of people who you've trusted in the name of lords and gods and Jesuses and Allahs and everything that have been looking you straight in your eyes, knew this information all the time, and has been taking kickbacks in the background while keeping this Negro, black, racist argument crap going that seems legitimate, but it isn't. It is a total diversion. Total diversion. And the more you learn about the true geography and history, the more you're going to start getting these people out of your way. And in doing so, you will be closer to the estate. This is what people who have been robbing you and who've been benefiting from this fraud don't want you to either know or act on. Are we clear? If you go over some of the things that Donald Trump has said at different times, once or twice or maybe here and there, you've seen where they've referenced to him as the President of the United States, and he's deliberately said, I'm the President of the Republic.
Yeah.
You should have caught that. Now, that was deliberate. Right? Now, people who know what he just said, that means that he's implying that he's dealing with supports relative to the old Silk Road being restored, and that the legitimate Coinage Act for the United States Republic is going to be restored with his help, in spite of the resistance on many fronts, because of the operative institutions that are in place, entrenched, have been operating the U.S. democracy, which is really a traitor platform set up in 1860, but is not known by the general public. The general public think the U.S. democracy is a freedom organization of government, and it is really the political platform of the coup d'etat that took place with the Lincoln administration and has systematically been operating on North America and launching wars all around the world in the name of America, and they're really foreign European colonists and inquisitionists, which is what all your wars are all about, all around the world. All the miseries that our people have been marching and praying about, all the lynchings, all the Rodney King beatings, all of the women who trying to exercise rights, they bust in their house and shoot them and act like they terrorists. All the knocking down of those buildings in New York, and they say some Muslim did it with a box knife and a computer in a cave in Afghanistan, and the masses believe that stuff because they want to believe it. They already know it's fiction. That's these people. That's the U.S. democracy platform. That's what Donald Trump is, put it this way, that's what's against him. Not so much that he's against it, by necessity. The United States corporation company operations have been run off a Manchurian bowl for over the last 55 years. They have not had their own treasury since the early 20s. Their policies of war have been to destabilize the Asiatic nations on the earth so that we cannot recover and take our land back. Under the name of terrorism and a whole bunch of other stuff. They're really inquisition operations that never ended. that the masses just think is an attitude. You know, like they'll just come up next week. These guys from Bisnitzeldorf in Bisnitzelstand of Oswald-Dinkeldorf is against the Christian world, and we need to stop them before they throw a missile at the base of the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C., and so we're sending troops over there. And then they go bombing these people and killing them. They never did nothing to nobody. And then our people have jumped the war. Yeah, I'm going to fight for my country so I can get a black Negro badge, because my father didn't get a badge because he was in the Second World War and everything. And then his grandfather, his father, you know, they was in the Negro troops of the Civil War. They didn't get their Negro badges yet. But I'm going to get my Negro badge, and our people go in all the wars and help this European foreigner fight their own people all around the world, because they don't know the geography, they don't know the politics, and this stuff has been going on forever. It's time for this stuff to end. Do you understand? The civilized world has kind of like given them a joker in the deck of cards and told them, fix this thing or we're going to start eliminating you all. Certain agreements are going on in relationship to let's try to fix this thing if we can without using nuclear weapons, but have no doubt about it, if you don't fix this thing, you're going to start disappearing. You've been going to and fro the earth, devouring nations. We're going to devour you. One way or the other. However, if you stop your activities and start doing some good on the planet, we will spare some of you, but still not all of you. So what's going on the planet Earth is the first real, serious counter activity that really threatens the stronghold of the Jesuit order operating on the planet Earth, with the proposition that they're going to physically start removing them and not arguing with them about what's right, wrong, or indifferent. But European colonial operations will be ended on this planet, one way or another. And those who have been helping them will be eliminated too, if necessary, but given an opportunity to reform themselves. And therefore, those with knowledge will be sent out them to try to moralize them and try to inform them to change their position. And let's try to make this transition into the Aquarian lights with some level of civility and less bloodshed. Or it's all over for everybody, which we don't want to do. However, with the idea that the Roman operations that have been damaging this earth for generations and centuries will continue, shall be nullified. So Donald Trump is sort of like caught in between, if you might say, because you take everything with a grain of salt, because he still has a Roman body. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? I'll help him to try to fix this thing, restore the republic and the integrity to government against odds that are more formidable than you probably think, which is why some of these things are going slowly, as you know. But that's really what's going on. He will make statements like someone who can see through it. He'll say, talk about white nationalism. And then people get all upset and they start arguing it to the negative, not understanding what he just said. So what is a white nationalist? Let's see. That implies the principle of nationalizing things. Then white nationalists, it implies two things. A connotative meaning, which is contemporary, and then a true meaning, which is the Americans of the land. But if you don't know that, where's it coming from? Just like you said, is going like this. Now, when you know that free white people does not include the Europeans. that with the Wigglesworth Party and Knights of Columbus Ku Klux Klan oath in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, demonstrated with that parade that took place yesterday, not yesterday, the day before, but I'm losing track of time, a few days ago, in Chickamauga, you call Philadelphia, you know. That's the celebration of the fall of the Moors. You know, now keep in mind, and this is redundant, jurisdiction. When the Red House fell near midnight, the Red House fell to the hands. Now you're dealing with Muhammad VII. Now Muhammad VII is Boabdil, right? Boabdil chose to give up the Red House, which is actually a city of palaces and of structures, which is referred to as one of wonders of the world. Now, the Red House is the major palace of Alhambra in Al-Andalus, which is later to be called Spain. And this fell January 1st, near midnight, in 1492. That's why 1492 is used around the world, with scholars and historians, in relationship to the falling of the old world and the new world order coming in, or the Germanic tribes that you call the Constantinian Christian nations coming into power. Translation is the fall of your forefathers. This is why they have the Mummers Parade in Philadelphia, January 1st. That's not New Year. That's the year of Roman conquest. New Year's is really what is called the vernal equinox, what you call the Passover, or the stars now in the east, Easter. That's the New Year, March the 21st. And so politically, they'll make the New Year political off-key of the real transitions of the sun in its ephemeral eclipses, to keep the masses dumb and out of harmony with divine law and nature, which is why they changed the calendars. And so Pope Gregory is given credit for what they call the Gregorian calendar. It's not his calendar. He adjusted the Ecliptic calendar, which is called the Egyptian calendar. Europeans never made calendars. That belongs to you too. You know, so once you know these things, you don't look at the politics the same way a person who doesn't know these things. Now, like say for instance, if you're an Eastern Star, right? These things would be fundamentally available to you, and although you would not necessarily talk these things with your family members, you would, if I'm talking this, you may not speak because you got an oath, but you wouldn't dispute what I'm saying because you got the same knowledge, right? And if she's the grand matron of the Daughters of the American Revolution, DAR, which Hillary is part of, she wouldn't dispute it either, right? And if you're a matron in the White Camellia, same thing. But publicly, you would not support what I'm saying. You would never admit it publicly. Why? Politically, it would not be in your interest. Not because it's not true, because you're living off these airs. And so this is how things have been operating, where people who are among you don't tell you certain things, or they don't support people who expose this stuff to you, or they will troll people who expose this information as if we are enemies to you, or lying to you. Because by telling you, you're also exposing them. I'll be clear. Even though they appear not to be connected to the leeches and parasites that are sucking you. See, because then you start, how do you say, you open up people's eyes and the puzzle starts coming together. It's sort of like shattered mirrors. If the pieces stay together a little bit, you start seeing the picture. It's kind of broke up. You start, hey, wait a minute. You know, you start seeing things. And when people are able to see, their naivety leaves. And remember, one of the keys to ruling people in a negative de facto manner is that you must keep them ignorant. And you must keep them steeped in idol God worship. All of this goes together. And you must keep them with fiat and make them believe that they got money when they're not allowed to be paid. And then give them dogma in the name of religion. Give them private commercial paper in the name of money. And give them color of law, color of authority, and color of office in the name of government. These three principal operations of the Trinity jurisdictions is what runs this planet to this day. Now, anyone in secret societies are given all the information in relation to that matter so that you don't start believing the game, although you might promote the game. Are we clear? Are we clear? Are we clear? So the code word would be, if you're an Eastern Star, then I would know that you were taken to the mountaintop. Right? Same thing with you, vice versa. Right? So he might be a temperate. I already know he's been taken to the mountaintop. Right? You're a matron of DAR, taken to the mountaintop. Right? He's a Shriner, taken to the mountaintop. So what is the mountaintop? Y'all got this? Right? On 20 degrees. Right? That makes 360, right? Equilateral triangle, right? And then you have the eye of Horus, right? Then you have symbolically, this is symbolically 13 courses, right? Equilateral pyramid. In Masonry, in sociology, right? In governmental circles, this would be called Muhammad's Mountain. Are we clear? And this would be called, in your secret societies, the Eye of Jove, Jove, or the Eye of Allah. And that would be registered in the Library of Congress, and if you want to know that, go down there and see yourself. It's not a secret, it's just that it's not taught to the masses, are we clear? And so when someone says, I've been to the mountaintop, that means they've been told the secret of the Great Seal. And so what they find in the base of that pyramid, that's the insignia of the ancient Canaanite Moabite nation, oldest civilization on the planet Earth, and not just on this planet, but also on some other planets in this particular solar system. Which means all of you didn't come here. All of you are not necessarily from this planet, right? And so they'll have a cube, right? 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees. That's 362, right? Right?
Yeah.
Right? And then they'll drape it in a black cloth. Or a black cloth. Saturn. The great teacher, right? That'd be for Saturday, right? And then inside this thing, they got a grave in the corner, and that grave is, come on, y'all. I'm writing. We always call her in the ancient world Aunt Hagar. Aunt Hagar. That's her grave. And then in the other corner, they got a meteorite. And this is called Kaaba, which means the cube. That's in the Holy City Mecca. No. Where did Aunt Hagar rule? Did she rule in South Asia, Asia Soul. She ruled in ancient Central Africa, or in Old Amexem, among what you call Olmec. And she is the great empress that authorized Hammurabi. Hammurabi Bey, whose rolls are used today all over this planet. Which is why the Europeans have an issue with you. And the children of Isis, Amen-Ra, Elohim, Israel. And certain mistreatments you have today. And why they don't teach you the truth about geography. Right? Well, if the rest of the world knows this, they'd be looking at you, hoping you don't figure this out. And others who are paid off do the best they can to keep it from you. And try to keep you in what you call an inferior state of mind, having an inferiority complex. Because they don't want you to ever start tapping that DNA energy and waking up the real truth of who you are in yourself. And some of you might be thinking about getting revenge. And the others, you know, may have taken different ways. Hopefully that you don't, you know, that you learned some of your lessons. You know, because you fell because you violated your own laws. It's just that the Romans are just exaggerating and taking advantage of you, if you get the point. But, you know, understand that you're not totally innocent in your demise. You know what I mean? So you don't come into this knowledge being self-righteous. That don't mean you're supposed to lay down and be a carpet for anybody to walk on you, because you paid a dear price for many generations. You know, but the time for your redemption is here in the Aquarian light. You know, it's time for you to morally rise and ethically rise, but for you to be competent in your rise. So you got to understand what happened to you. And, you know, if you don't understand jurisdiction, your concepts will be wrong. And it's very important for us to be competent in our activities from here on in. You know, and while some of the Roman sons are trying to help, some, you know, still trying to bury you. And then there's some, you know, as we're trying to dig the dirt off of you, are trying to throw the dirt back in. This is the battle that you see going on now around the world, on clear, in the politics. Even where you see new alliances being made around the world with people who politically were former enemies are becoming friends, or what appears to be friends, because they know if they don't end this colonial operations, they're going to be ended too. If you get the point. No different than you'll see a lot of European sons and daughters starting to tell the truth about the history, because it is finally dawned on them teach such jurisprudence or issues in law to try to preserve estates, but the state that they're arguing still ain't theirs. You know, so it's sort of like they still trying to save the peanut butter sandwiches in the cupboard that still ain't theirs. And so a lot of the arguments that you see going on with the European sons and daughters here are arguments among themselves about an estate that don't belong to them. So here we go again, jurisdictions. So it's important from, we'll say etheric. Some will say spiritual, but we'll say etheric perspective. To stop calling Europeans Americans, because they are not Americans. Stop calling Europeans white man, because that's a legal status, that's not a complexion. Although the Knights of Columbus took that term on in 54 and 63, which has much to do with the Mummers Parade, which is all about the fall of the Moors. I want to tell you all something else again, and then get our brother Mike in a minute too. You know, in Times Square, you know, in New York, when they have the ball dropping at midnight in New York, which is the Empire State. Do you know why they have the ball symbolically dropping? Because conquer the world, and all of the world powers symbolically fell when the Caliphate of the Moorish Empire fell in Granada, Al-Andalus. And since 1492, it's been a downward spiral ever since, and you are the target. And the sooner you get that through your head and stop dealing with colors and crayons and marching attitudes and everything, and start dealing with the real history, the real geography, the sooner you can start redeeming yourselves and redeeming the generation that you have responsibility to stop throwing away and trying to act like the younger generation is raising themselves, and tell the truth that you did that to them. So don't criticize them, civilize them. You know what I mean? Because when you see a lot of the what you call OGs and old heads, they'll be sitting around talking about, you know, particularly with our sons, you know, with the fad styles they're doing now with their jeans around their knees and stuff like that, which is totally disrespectful. However, that's a fad, right? You know, just like a lot of things we did as we grew up, you know, we're rolling our pants legs up and fads. You know, and you'll see a lot of the older ones criticizing that to the negative because they know that that's a prison signal for homosexuality. That's what they do in the prisons, right? For you know, it's called the down low, right? And then state property and all of these things, you know. So those who understand what it really signifies, you know, say it's negative. But the point that I'm making to you, we have left little for them in the way of any civic organizations that give them any foundation, rather than beliefs that they've discovered that never work because all they see is broken families, you know, drugs rampant in their families and in communities. Community. And the IRS comes stealing everything and then gentrifying our communities at will all the time, on a constant. You know, and then their parents acting like, you know, they're the only ones got watermelon and Jesus. And so they look at us as extreme and hypocritical, naive, untrustable people that are using guilt trip, you know, religious dogma, guilt trips, and BS to make them do things that all they've seen is destruction come from, and they ain't buying it. So they're trying to survive the best way that they can with their limited knowledge in a political system that's designed to destroy them in the first place. You know what I mean? And so you see all this destruction among them, and then you see the adults not taking responsibility that they have not set up any civic organizations. They got a lot of bars and churches though. Not one civic organization to teach them fundamental governing principles, criticizing them, you know, with this generation gap that we created. As if we didn't, like they made themselves and they're just out there doing their thing, as if we didn't abandon them, which is exactly what we did. That's called jurisdiction. You know, so we need to fix that. Go ahead, good brother.
And they're not going to get it because it all started really from, once again, the birth certificate, the form that your parents fill out, and re-enslaved you under the system, and then you still continually being programmed to sign these contracts, which is actually court. Also, you lose jurisdiction. You go to the, and you get baptized, and you get school ID.
Yeah.
You get a driver's license. Then you know, and so on. When you apply for a job, once again, when you label yourself, they say with your race. That's not a race. Listen, I've been contesting this since I was a kid. When I see I haven't really worked for nobody ever really in my life. But
Now, as soon as people say something other than that, they're already, unbeknownst to themselves, declared incompetent and accepted under wardship. Now, so what, again, since there comes under the employ of the Jesuit order, because the United States is their order, right? And they're too dumb to recognize it's not a country, that it's actually a plantation. All of their estate is transferred to the corporate state. And of course, with the marriage certificate being a sales instrument of the womb, under the ritual of serving the children up to the high priest, that's what the baptism is. So you sacrifice that baby's life to them. And so everything they operate from that on is the issue. One of the things that I want to remind you, and this is with all of us, is to depersonalize the instrumentality of the bodily instruments, i.e., the birth certificate did nothing to us. The marriage certificate did nothing to us. The popes of Rome and the clergy, in working with the popes of Rome, hiding behind the name Jesus, working with the hospitals under the Christian black codes documented, have been serving these people to the corporate state in the name of Jesus with the marriage certificate, selling the womb and the eggs of the womb, knowingly getting a 501c3 skull and bones kickback agreement, which is why they're not taxed. And telling people that's because they're teaching the word of the Lord, when the Lord is, they're teaching the words of the Lords of London under the secret treaty of Rome, impersonating. And so now these certificates are sold on Water Street. Now the point that I'm saying to you is this: let's not say, no, it's choose other words. And it's not you. Because I think a lot of times when we're talking about these bodily instruments, there's a psychology of putting it on the people that they're doing these things willingly, when the people don't know that these are bodily instruments. And that the bodily instrument is not doing it to them. It is the Templars, the Knights of Columbus, and Masons and DARs who are doing it, who are administrating clerks under the secret treaty of Verona, under the corporate states of subdivisional franchisees of the owners of the United States Service Corporation to convert their estates to the United States of America Corporation Minor, registered in Puerto Rico. And that these instrumentalities are actually bonds on human chattel. Because a lot of times when we say, your contract, it's not any linear alleged contract in contract law is not a contract. But I'm just saying, I understand it, you understand it. What I'm saying a lot of times, and I'm saying this deliberately, because this is another reason why I'm dealing with jurisdiction. Because the way we choose to say it converts the responsibility on the victim of the fraud, as if they willingly knew that the marriage certificate was a sale of their womb. And I suggest to you that the average person, not based on their intelligence, but lack of information, does not know and did not know that the marriage certificate is a sale bond of their womb and eggs, present and future, to the popes of Rome and the bishopric of Rome. Now, most of them don't know that. And most of them believe that Reverend Jones down there has nothing to do with the popes of Rome because he's Protestant. These concepts, I know some know, but I'm saying that because we don't want to cast spells. We want to redeem the people. And the real deal of it is, it's uncomfortable enough for them to find out that they've been in conspiracy against their own lifeline, unknowingly and unwillingly. However, wouldn't it be more wise and more becoming if we start teaching them the rescission of contract, and that these instruments can be neutralized, but they must be done politically and in real time, meaning not just with an attitude or knowing that they're fraud, but that the instrumentality by which you can neutralize these instrumentalities in an organized manner. You know, like, as an example, when Pope Francis wrote that letter to Obama, with the help of and support of Anna von Reitz, who was acting as a judge in Alaska for them, right? For the Pope, right? Yeah. And actually telling the history of the corporate shells by the writing structures, meaning that doing the capital letters, talking about all estates being reverted back to the people or revenued. This is the point that I'm making, you know, with you as a scholar yourself, because you're a scholar yourself, that we start picking our words more carefully, and even check me when I make that mistake, because we all do. To depersonalize the corporate entities. Have been trained, there's a commonality of us speaking that way just in normality of communication. But in divine law, when you project the intended truth with the wrong words, you still cast a spell. And so we must be more careful of the workings of the dark priesthood, and we must consciously counter them. And so, and write this down because it's important, though I'm not going to go into this right now. Personage, that's the subject matter. And personage is a whole area of jurisprudence in contemporary world dealing with the operations of economics and social controls merely by putting personality to corporate entities and entity constructs and interjecting it into languages of contracts and of everyday affairs. And in doing so, when the people use personage linguistics, connotative, without qualification, that they actually undo all legal arguments of right of claim. And I think because the intention is to tell the truth, to try to help the people, a lot of times we just spill the beans carelessly and will still give personality to entity. As an example, for those who don't understand where I'm coming from, I know most of you being scholars know better. This is where, like, say for instance, as an example, with an instrument that was sent to my domicile on a whole series of tickets, which are foreign exchange instruments, that was given to me in Annapolis as I was traveling up here from Virginia area. And I sent them back, in Reading, 45 degrees, keep your stuff, I ain't contracting with you, blah, 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 blah. And they would send a lot of stuff for me to come to court in Annapolis, right? And so, the usual thing. And so they tried to get the attorney, the state attorney to issue a warrant for my estate to seize me to pay for these tickets. The state attorney told them to go fly a kite. Right? But that's predicated on, because they already know that I ain't gonna play with them any kind of way you look at it, and that if they keep messing, somebody's gonna start losing. Do you understand what I'm saying? My interest is to get that with all of our people, and more than that, with all of our people. Do you understand what I'm saying? Which is already their right, but people around them are not teaching them. And they're not on an Article 3 forum to do it as a routine operational matter. Jurisdiction. That already exists, that they have not been operating on. But also cannot operate on as long as they're in the black codes.
Right.
Because they're not recognized by the civilized world. Because they're stateless, and And it's not that cures are not there. They're not informed. And what I see a lot of times as I travel the country with different people and dealing with other problems that are people having with opportunists among us who have this information, who are trying to rape them economically along the way rather than just organizing, telling the truth. You know, servant is worthy of his hire, but beyond his hire, he's a robber. Do you understand what I'm saying? So if we remove the personage in our conversation, we will stop casting the spells. And remember, as long as you don't feed a vampire, he can't grow in strength. You know, so we will never say like the state of Maryland wrote me. The state of Maryland didn't do a damn thing to you.
Right.
You know, well, Wilmington said, and Wilmington sent me a tax, but Wilmington ain't sent you nothing. Find out the man or woman behind that instrument that sent any damn thing to you and address that man or woman. Your responsibility in your everyday affairs, which you already understand, right, is to separate the issue of personage. That is one of the most important things for, as a practice, to start occurring among us. And this is particularly with active Moors, or people who really understand national. You ain't giving them nothing. Another. What happens is I see we still in that gray area where you still have people among us that still try to capitalize on this information, on our people, trying to own the birthright, trying to get a little piece of the action before the people get totally wake. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? So the sooner we can start cracking that spell by making sure that we start checking each other. And every time we keep saying things like, Wilmington sent me an instrument that I gotta change my tire on my car because it's against the ordinance and they're going to take my license and blah, 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 blah. You gotta get it out of your mind. Those are private instrumentalities related to private, corporate, for-profit, human trafficking, corporate entities that are constructs on paper that have no law behind them whatsoever, but have organized men and women in criminal operations for human trafficking that convinced an ignorant body of people that they are legitimate government and they're de facto. And that the only reason why you keep getting screwed is because you won't organize and come back under constitutional operations of Article 3 courts that you have right to exercise yourselves. You don't need nobody's permission. You just need to be competent. But instead, we'll get around and march and pray. And guys who see that energy will get these people together and march and pray them all over the place and take millions of notes from them when they should be teaching them Article 3, diversity of nationality and diversity of citizenship standards that operate all over the world to protect their estates and stop giving their finance to both them marching guys and the opportunists in the communities, and stop calling the corporate entities that the corporate entities say Santa Claus sent me a letter from the IRS and I owe them 5 sandwiches.
We want you to click that on you because we're trying to figure out how to fix the sound.
And I owe the IRS 5 sandwiches and all this sort of stuff. And so I gotta make a contract with the IRS because I owe them. You don't owe them anything. There's not one being in this room that ever, at any time, in law, in honor, in integrity, in contract, that owed the Inquisition Revenue Services styled corporately as the Internal Revenue Services set up by the Jesuit order under Fleet Street and the Circle Church in Westminster, England, London, that operates through Washington, D.C., which is not the Capitolium. The Capitolium is Philadelphia still. and has been robbing you under the Christian black codes for generations, and you hear people in advertisements on TV and everything talking about, you may owe the IRS thousands. And the real deal of it is, these are the things that we, those who know, need to be fixing in our communities. Not marching and trying to raise some funds. Stop the bleeding under these colorful operations that have been taking place with a people who think that they're spiritual, who've been getting screwed by persons who are claiming to be spiritual, that is on every 2 blocks in different areas in any poor city, that these people have never known are really spy centers. And it never dawned on them that these are spy centers. Even after being told, they don't get it, that these are spy centers. And that they are a body of clergy under the Secret Treaty of Verona, Article 3, that worked with the popes of Rome under the Spanish Inquisition to conquer these people in the name of Jesus. And that is the absolute and provable, documented truth, which is why they're poor. And they'll be talking about getting another job. They don't know Joe Longo, Shorto, Joe Job, Joe Button. Take them right to the Bible and show them their job. There's their Job right there. And they're old, and they still ain't caught on. Therefore, all I'm saying is, on another level, the more they understand jurisdictional borders, which are also abstracts, right? So they must know the physical jurisdictions, and they must know the abstract. And these are just fundamentals that should have been taught to them in 3rd and 4th grade. But it's never too late. And because the liquidations of these estates are taking place now as we speak on the world stage, it would be better that we clarify these things with them, rather than make them think that they may, like, I'll hear this statement, and you'll hear this too. You know you've got contracts out there. You've got contracts out there, and you have signed your name and sold yourself through this contract, blah, 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 blah. No. Any linear contract in contract law is not a contract. So one, they don't have any contracts. So it's not a fraud after the fact because it's misrepresented. It's a fraud because it's linear. And it's also a fraud because unalienable rights cannot be placed in a lien platform. Therefore, they can't be lawfully on a commercial platform, and then you be obligated to do some other commercial activity to regain the right to an estate that is yours, that's related in a private corporate entity on Wall Street, and related to the Jesuit order and the crown operations in Fleet Street in London that you have nothing to do with. Whether it's a marriage certificate, a driver's license, or birth certificate. And everybody keeps emphasizing the birth certificate that because of the Europeans in the middle class being, actually, even before them, with the French and the oligarchs and the monarchs loaning the United States corporation finance.
Sterling, so.
Yes. And then they misclassified the descendants of the Moors as Negro, Black, and colors and U.S. citizens in order to convert their private debt on us who their forefathers have treaty with. And try to act like we all the same Americans who owe this finance that they ain't talking about. This, unpayable debt, which is what's going on right now. And this is the liquidation of the states. So over the years, with them closing the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands, we'll get his sister Mike in a minute, in the corner. It's important for us to be clear of how we got to where we are now. And we got to stop saying we when it comes to this alleged debt with these instrumentalities. That we have been misrepresented as U.S. citizens when we're American nationals who have treaty relations with members, mostly deists, of the European families under treaty and the ordinance of 1787. Outside of that, we have no obligation with them. They misclassified us. Now, what happens is a lot of Europeans trying to act like they're Americans who've been misclassified. No, they ain't misclassified. They are corporate U.S. citizens operating on American soil, misrepresenting themselves as Americans, and now that the instrumentalities have been used and are lodged against them to steal their estates, and they thought they weren't going to be sacrificed or thrown on the bus, now they want the republic back. Jurisdiction. So with our people, at different times having discussions on the distinction between the republic and the democracy, have not taken it far enough to understand its far-reaching basis on generations, in that it's not just an interest of misrepresentation of information, but this is all of your economics. All of the problems that you've been having, even with your broken families, are rooted in this, in the issue of jurisdictional arguments that have not been made. And not being made, there's an assumption of tacit acquiescence, whereas there's an assumed jurisdiction where they've been operating on. And then using that as an excuse to enforce the Inquisition operations of the Christian black codes, etc., against our families. And they've been doing it to this very day. They won't even let these women out of the hospitals without forcing them to sign a birth certificate. And there is no Asiatics in the community that will step into the issue on a consular principle to dispel those activities. Again, that's Article 3. That's jurisdiction. So I'm only saying that to saying, let's stop giving the entities personality. We must undo what was done. So in 68, when they started emphasizing personage onto their corporate subdivisional franchisees, and then they continued that push up into what, 40s, the late 40s, and this is where they modified all of the corporate state constitutions between 36 and 40 and stuff like that to neutralize their correlation with the federal constitution in order to justify the bodily instruments that Franklin Delano Roosevelt had set up in 33. But mind you, that stuff proceeded in with Woodrow Wilson as a countermeasure to Noble Raleigh in 1913, even when they converted all the allodial titles and aboriginal titles to mortgages and deeds in 1913, not in 1933 with Woodrow Wilson. So, and then you go before that with the Christian Black Codes and the Freedmen's Bureau, when they used the marriage certificates, which were also bank bonds, the same way that the birth certificates are today. But you don't see them emphasizing that, do you? Do you? And so what I'm saying is that we, being conscious of that, must dispel all of those instruments. And for those who don't have a consciousness, be organized in such a manner that we can put these things back in place in an honorable forum. Because you have the right and the authority to do so. And then you have what you call obligations. And that only be between, the man and woman who are in matrimony by nature. And if they produce a child, that's already matrimony. All the rest of the stuff is formalities for the public. Ain't no daggone contract with no other man. Because there can't no man marry, because that's a spell. Marriage, understand this too, let's get this straight. Marriage is a spell set up by the priesthood. Guaranteed to fail. It's already a negative cast. It's dealing with the low energy of Mars, I, the 9/11 in the alphabet, dealing with the psychology of the being, and rage. They usually don't last 3 years unless, if beyond economics, and they don't break up after 3 years, that's because she can't leave because she ain't got a JOB, but she's tired of that shit already. This is true because it's a spell. They don't know it's a spell. Do you understand what I'm saying? Now, the priest who did it knows it's a spell. He gets a kickback. She be thinking that we go registering this with the Lord. Oh, Jesus. They take it down to vital statistics. It goes on Wall Street. And he gets a kickback. Rev. I'm serious. These people really don't understand the politics. Everything that they think is godly, divine, is usually the opposite. And you know how harsh that is. That's a hard thing for our people to come to a realization of. And for the most part, you may be able to redeem a lot of youth. A lot of old people, you can consider them like new wine in old skins. They'll burst. They just can't, not that they can't, they're unwilling to handle the truth. So you're going to have to kind of liberate the youth coming, because the truth got to come from the mouth of babes, because the old ones, they just totally sold out. They just don't know that Rome going to kill them. You know, they think if they keep on kissing Rome's butt, Rome is going to be nice to them. Yeah, it's exactly that. That's it. Executive Order 11490, Rex 84, military operations. Islam says, I apologize for holding you up this long, but I wanted to get that off my chest. Because they're dealing with jurisdictions.
Islam. I'm just wondering if a person would like to nationalize, at the end of the lecture class, that we have paperwork or the applications or proclamation forms.
Well, proclamations are on your flash drive that you get from Dr. Nailah in the first place.
I haven't gotten it yet.
You get a flash drive from her?
No.
Well, what we had, when we started actually sharing that on other sites for years. Let me say this to you. Let me say this to you. A lot of people who we would like to think really are helping to try to liberate the people have been against us freely exercising those papers for these people. Including those who should have done this generations ago and have breached their offices and not been unseated. Are we clear? Which is reality when you start analyzing this stuff and the length of time that this information has been openly shared with people, and they've still been cheated by people who should have made all kinds of effort to start liberating these people. So we put it on a flash drive and start giving it to people. We do have, logically, some of the problems of people not really comprehending the papers correctly or concepts, because this is really a nation's business that's being exercised by people who are exercising what you call national trust without compensation. Must be done, meaning you got to start somewhere. And so this is why we started sharing the flash drive, because we even with our limitations and our shortcomings can only do but so much. We have to try to trust that you would be honorable with yourself. We talk about in general, to take information and to study and use it with integrity, and evolve with it and really do study and start to restoring your libraries. You can't make people do that, you can suggest it. And so as people are going along, it'll take them time to really comprehend what this information really is. And as they're going along, they're going to have revelations that they experience, including people who they have circled with at this time that they may not have circled with next year when they find out that they're not as honorable as you thought they were. Do you understand? And then others who may have been totally against it, but wake up, can be your most strong and ardent components. Like, as an example, I won't name anyone. There's a few people in my experience of traveling, and one of which was super duper ardent opposition to me and this stuff that I'm doing, I'm renegade and every devil and a whole bunch of that stuff. Couldn't get a stronger supporter right now. But it had to dawn on him in his own. He was going so hard to try to disprove me that he educated himself. I'm serious. I'm serious. He wished I was dead twice and made into hog sandwiches. I'm serious. Now would protect me with his own life. And one of the things he said once in a while, I was worried about when I go out around the world, around the country by myself. I ain't taking my mother with me. You understand? Because I don't, I have a kind of a different mentality, so that I don't fear death. That's number one. And I do what I do. If it is to die, then I would do it anyway. So they can't buy me. I've been offered finance and everything, comfortable women, a whole bunch of stuff. None of the stuff's impressing me because that's not why I'm here. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? So they can't buy me. You understand what I'm saying? So don't waste your time. So what they do is they put people around you to try to neutralize you. Do you understand? I know how the game works, although I'm still subject to these things too. You already know how it is. I had somebody I thought was my girlfriend for a minute. She was an agent. Like for real. Not, I'm talking about for real. I said, who sent you? That's when my psychic kicked in. What do you mean? I said, who sent you? She went upstairs, I went out the door. And that's true. One thing you'll find, truthfully, honestly, that when you really start digging into truths of the human condition, you're going to find yourself on a narrow path and pretty much alone. But you're never alone at the same time. You're never alone. But you're alone if that's what you think it is. But you're never alone. So put it this way, it's over for Rome. The deal of it is for those who know to try to save as many as they can. Man has not the ability to save another man. And man is the species, the manifest. He has the ability to agitate them to activate their DNA, and they must save themselves. However, Rome will try to eliminate anybody who rocks the boat. Do you understand? And of course, if you succumb to that, then you serve in Rome. Because we already know that Mother can give us another body. So you already understand that man don't die. They can just hold you up for a minute. Then your mom give you another body. Now, the deal of it is some of the things that the Dark Priesthood has done, one of the things that's kind of messed them up right now is that they put the energy of the ancient ones in multiple bodies now, so it doesn't matter what they do. In other words, they take one, they're wasting their time. Not only are they wasting their time, they accelerate the energy. It's sort of like a reverse polar exercise on the ethereal plane of the planets. So whereas Rome has traditionally maintained their power by taking out the prophets and the seers, they do it now, it accelerates the energy. So it's almost like sticking their finger in. See if this works. So they can be tempted to do what they want to do, that's all that. But it is like this. It accelerates their demise. So they can slow this stuff down, but they can't stop it. And the more they do to stop it, the more they expose themselves. Dr. Nailah, the heat's on, isn't it?
I'm going to I turned on, but I was getting hot tonight.
Yeah. And I got this turtleneck sweater on. I was watching the vampires and stuff. No, I'm just joking.
If you watch,
Now,
you watch the movie, it's called, which I don't really, I mean, not for entertainment anymore. It's a movie called Robin Hood with Jamie Foxx. He's more in the movie.
Oh, you mean,
You understand, you just got how to get the message out of the movie. I'm telling you, that's the movie.
right on. Now,
Because
say it on the mic, say it on the mic so you get on the mic. And then give the mic back into the brother can share the information.
more than pretty enough.
No, it's Jamie Foxx. It's a new movie out, Robin Hood. Jamie Foxx,
Yeah.
one of the leading actors, and another guy from Kingston. He's actually Hood from Kingston. Anyway, I forget the names, but Jamie Foxx was more in the movie. And the best. You understand I look at these movies for I read the message.
Yeah.
I don't watch for entertainment.
Because they do use them to tell you.
Right, exactly. So that's with everything you're saying is going on. It's like the industry has bumped it up.
Yeah.
Right.
Because you already know pharmaceuticals is really part of the military.
Oh, you well, okay.
Because, I mean, and this is back to personage, that we, the people, when we're communicating with the people, what we've got to do is choose language, whereas in the language, not debating with them, but that takes the wool off the owners of the corporate entities. Takes the wool off and always starts referring to the living men and women, the owners. As an example, like part of the political forum right now is taking place on the planet, right? Where in the real world of operations, Zuckerberg and the CIA. Things as ordinary as them profiling somebody on the corner, and you see the lights, emergency lights flashing, and then profiling our people, for tinted windows and petty stuff and doing all kinds of stuff to them. We got to start dealing with the persons and their names, and don't call them officer. They're members of the gangs of New York under contract to the United States Service Corporation to dismantle organized families in targeted communities, calling themselves law officers, and they are not. However, they have an oath of ethics that they had to sign when they took those JOBs. And those ethic oaths are available, and then you trace down their equity bonds and their surety bonds and start putting liens on them in an organized fashion, just for even giving the ticket in the first place as an organized operation.
Exactly.
And it's wise that it come from people in an organized body politics, not in your singular personality. Okay? Go ahead, Doctor. Give Dr. Nailah the mic. Now, since you got get your questions over. Because you can pass the mic along.
Regarding jurisdiction, can jurisdiction be enforced or exercised if you didn't create the thing?
No, jurisdiction is a fact of human endeavor.
Okay.
And you're right on another level. And this is where, as an example, I think what would be good for us to choose to, not yet, don't give it up yet, for us to choose to discuss in the future, maybe sometime, is do a little bit more research on that European duelist named Trochet, the one that they took to ecclesiastical court for perfecting the authentication of the birth certificate and tried to disappear her. And because of the outrage of people around the world, that's the only reason why she ain't disappeared. And this is where people who should be looking at these things and having a comprehension of these things, even with the birth certificate issue. Any place where the corporate operative Europeans pretending at all in the Western governing, corrupt government operations by promising them, say 35, 40 years ago, with HMOs, then site drafts, then affidavits to the Transportation Department, then UCC 1, 3, and UCC 9 financial statements. Now the birth certificates, all of which are related to the Global Estate Trust that was set up from Boniface right on out under the Spanish Inquisition, with Rome ruling the world. And where most people that are dealing with these transmitting utilities are not aware of the history behind them, they're just saying the straw man and capturing the straw man and getting a hold of the statement. And anytime somebody perfects the process, when it all boils down, there is no obligation on any being to do any instrumentality to counter, meaning that in an offered process to undo a fraud that someone else created without your permission. It creates no obligation upon you. This is why Pope Francis said in the letter to Obama that all estates misrepresented and transferred to the United States of America minor under fraud and deceit and systematic deceit are revenued without exception to the true beneficiaries and the true Americans, etc., without any encumbrance, without any debt, without any obligation whatsoever. Now, that is predicated on the fact of contract law, not only on the moral argument. And it is the fundamental principle is that as the world has been waking up to the fraud of the Spanish Inquisition operations, they keep on being distracted by these offers of redemption in relationship to processes, whether you deal with the UCCs, Uniform Commercial Codes, which was also set up as a fraud in 66 to 68, when they became uniform, when they was blackmailing representatives of Texas who wouldn't go along the program. This is why they became the UCCs. And as soon as someone perfects them, like that woman did, and she was European, right? They try to disappear her. Now, keep this in mind. They will give a few apples in the barrel of the basket that belonged to you in the first place in order to have the people keep faith in the system. Meaning they'll give what you call appearances of wins. Because if they give you absolutely nothing, you lose faith. And if the faith dies, the fiat dies that's behind it. They don't want that connection to be ever made in the minds of the people. And all I'm saying is essentially, what my appeal to the people has been this: reject Rome altogether. Don't feed the beast on any front. I'm not denying that we have not been compromised. I know that we have been. Learn to sign in contract and reject Rome altogether, because Rome only lives because we keep feeding her. Rome, the harlot, must go down in flames. And we've got to stop going to bed with her. You understand what I'm saying to you? And I understand that we're under pressure. I say keep your life humble as you can. If you make it through this thing, as you survive through this thing, everything that you want is available to you anyway. Because part of it is a test to see honor. Who is worthy of the estate. Because it ain't going anywhere. It's just that the issue, jurisdictionally, Rome was controlling it. But things are being taking place on the planet now that the power is being removed from Rome. In the process, this is why Rome and the bishop is offering these different processes at different times. They may have different names, but all of them relate to the World Estate Trust. You must know what that estate trust is. It is the estate of the Moroccan Empire that was overthrown. That is just simply it. And so the real deal is who's the real beneficiaries. And so what's happening, and this is back to what you were saying, what has been happening with a lot of Europeans, as an example, like say in the late 80s, 89, 80, 90, 91, in that area, to 93. A few Europeans used to come to my class sometimes on Trenton Avenue in Camden. And at my house, at that time, on Middle Street, because I used to teach 3 times a week, and I used to feed people and give them literature. I did about 9 years until it broke me. That was a sacrifice, but that's what I used to do. And some Europeans used to come there, a couple of them wealthy. And also was a couple of Europeans whose names I will not mention that were doing radio shows and teaching some of what you call sovereign issues. One of the classes was $1,500 for you to walk into class. I was giving stuff freely. You understand what I'm saying to you? But the deal of it is this is what happens with many of them when they perfect the different systems. The magistrates will tell them, you can't use that constitution as a defense. You're not a party to it.
Exactly.
Now, and this is why it's important for people to really understand history. When we agreed to be Negroes and blacks, we lost our birthright in relationship to estates. So even if you had the knowledge, if you went into a legal venue arguing about estates and inheritances, and you talk about your personal color, or Negro or black, not only could they throw you out, they could stomp you on the way. Do you understand? You have no standing at law, and you have no business coming in and talking about human events or human estates because you are not a party to it. Now, Europeans who beginning to recognize that they've been tossed under the bus have a knowledge of the history here. And so they start a lot of sovereignty groups all around the place and start talking about the real history and how everything was overthrown, including the distinction between the republic and the democracy, the debt with France, etc., that belongs to the United States Corporation, not to the people, but then perfect them because they already know the real deal. The magistrates tell them, you can't use that constitution as defense. You're not a party to it. But at the same time, now they become dangerous because they're putting stuff out in the what's called educational circle. So those kind of sites, they'll just shut them down. You know, you start talking about the real politics here, you have a website, they'll shut that stuff down. You know, you gotta kind of put it out in such a way that it gets across, but at the same time, tentatively, in another way, you can actually load up things and come back within an hour and load up something else, and they'll shut your site down. You almost got to put it out there like with a pattern that does not move one way or another. You got to remember, this is the world's estate, and the masses don't get it. A lot of them still don't get it. A lot of them still do not get it. But essentially, the Europeans, and it's sort of like this was this woman that used to come to my class on Trenton Avenue. She was a wealthy European, lived in Hatfield. She's a writer for a very famous magazine, an editor for a very famous magazine. And she asked me what my opinion was on Phil Marsh and others, some other people that's on radio, and some of these other groups. And I asked her, I said, what's her nationality? And she was talking about her mother and her father, German and I think Polish, something like that. I said, well, that's what your nationality is. So you start talking about sovereignty. The unless you got a nationality, you can't argue sovereignty. You're not American, so get over it. And you're not white, so get over it. And it doesn't make you not welcome. Bullshit's not welcome, that's all. It's what it is. And so what's happening with a lot of these European groups who had this knowledge and have been starting to exercise into the processes, they've forgotten. Knights of Columbus Ku Klux Klan over with the Whitmore Party. When they started playing to be white people, they lost their birthright. And the only thing that protected them was the temporal codes and the codes, the Klan codes that were enforced under a color of law, under the U.S. democracy military platform. When that platform is being dismantled as it is being today, they have no more what you call Inquisition hegemony protection with the white people concept of what they call white supremacy falsely. It was artificially propped up with a military operation. That's why they got all these military bases in all of the nation states to destabilize the nation states, to hold up the Inquisition hegemony that the dumbasses call white supremacy. The platform is being dismantled, so therefore the fraud is being dismantled. Because the whole platform is propped up by the force of arms. That's it. And so the deal of it is, they're doing whatever they can to keep the people in this spooky frame of mind to support the system that's put in place to actually destroy them. So they'll put out different processes with a promise of redemption, authentication of the bodily instrument that Franklin Delano Roosevelt set up with the Banking Act and all that stuff, the trading with the enemy and all that stuff in the 30s, and so this is where the birth certificate redemption and authentication comes from, still trying to attack the executive position of being the true beneficiary in relationship to that estate regulated from England, for the popes of Rome, etc. So, my position with that, all of it is, that if you, and the is, I kind of remove that, we need to educate our people where they start rejecting the system because the estate is theirs. Stop trying to dance through hoops. Stop thinking that you got to make a contract to undo a other contract that's not a contract, that's in place, that's been operating on Wall Street and the stock market, that put a burden on you, and think that therefore that burden is on you, and you're under the burden of trying to educate yourself, and you've got to do some contract to undo that unwritten contract and unexposed and unexplained contract with many facets that undergird the entire economic system of the Western world. And that if you don't, therefore you're still enslaved. I ain't going for that. Not because it's BS in contract law. But what I do recognize is that by the people not operating in an organized manner under Article 3, that they're not putting too much pressure on these people who are really doing this human trafficking. Now, and so to act like they're dismantling this, they're talking about pedophilia and everything, which is true but a distraction. You know what I mean? Because the real deal is that those pedophilias are really the rituals of child sacrifice come from the church for hundreds of years. It's not a circumstance of modern incident. This has really been the church all the time. They didn't fall, that's who they always were. The fact that the people didn't know that, that's on them. You understand? And the fact that the people have been supporting the church, thinking they're supporting the Jesus, that's still on them. But they themselves have been part of feeding the dragon that they've been complaining about, calling the devil, that's been devouring the world, that's been going to and fro the earth, devouring nations. They've been funded by the very people who've been devoured. And so what I'm saying is, this is again why it's important for people to understand jurisdiction, whether in personam jurisdiction, subject matter jurisdiction, and above all, territorial jurisdiction, the aggregate territorial political borders, abstract and real, relative to nation states. This is why you see the New World Order, which is really the old New World Order, Novus Ordo Seclorum, of the Inquisition operations, trying to reinforce its stronghold, which it is losing on the planet. So again, when you're looking at the politics, take with a grain of salt and don't take either side. Observe them. But as far as appearances, not fact, Trump is more on the honorable image side, although not given credit for by people who don't understand the politics. However, at the same time, just observe them, because they're fighting over your pretending to be Americans, arguing about an estate that ain't theirs. And one makes a more beautiful argument than the other, and you start picking sides. Don't pick sides, or observe them. But meanwhile, organize with yourselves and get yourselves together, because it's your estate that everybody's arguing over. But one of the keys to unraveling the web of this spider is to stop calling them white people. Not just understand that it's intellectually, factually, and politically incorrect, but it was designed to steal your birthright, and stop calling them Americans. It's not an insult, it's just simply the truth. And in doing so, you will see who the foreigners are. And then, at the same time, a lot of the Asiatics here who are walking around with the suppression of green cards, even some of the things that we talk about, Dr. Nailah, with people who have matrimony in other political jurisdictions that want to bring their spouses to other territories. Are we clear? The platform is Article 3. And the reason why the hindrance is there is because they're under that false jurisdiction de facto, United States Trading Corporation. And they're not dealing with really a country jurisdiction, they're dealing with private human trafficking platform pretending to be a country when the country or the real sovereigns are sitting around playing Negro, Black, and colored marching games. Because they don't know that they're really the government. They're really the republic. Their psychology is that among them that they can't run government. The psychology is, not the fact. Do you understand? And this is again why Dr. Nailah, month and a half, maybe 2 months ago, we went over the Milligan case of 1866. And this is where that when the military, because we're dealing with what you call the U.S. corporation military operations, you know, is the old French issue that people keep talking about, having them military training ports all around the land in the name of country, but it's really military U.S. corporation, that when a civilian body politic is operative and operates the port, that they must dismantle. This is fundamentally the knowledge of what we've been telling people for years relative to what Drew Ali was really telling these people in Act 1 of the Divine Constitution and Bylaws, where he said, go back to that state of mind of your ancient mothers and fathers, because you find this stuff out. But if you just take the information just as it's presented, you would stay in a naive state of mind, because you would start getting this idea that they're worshiping, you know, or idolizing Drew Ali rather than paying attention to what he's telling you. Because the platform that he set up is your redemption platform on estate. And there's been this ritual process where they start actually worshiping at him than really paying attention to what he told you. Or, yes, and enforcing that Constitution. Now, it is that platform by which the cure, that's where your cure is. It's the diversity. You're talking about distinguishing discernment. Write that down, discernment. Distinguishing. Knowing the difference. Diversity between the United States treaty and constitution principles of fatwa, distinguished from the U.S. democracy platform, which is the substitute imposter platform put in place in 1861 and solidified in 1871, which is what's been operating, which is why you've been catching hell. It's that simple. But yet they're both called the United States. Not being able to make that distinction with most people is part of what the problem is. They don't understand the jurisdictional platforms. And even when you give them the information, it seems not to clear out of their heads, which is again why we chose this subject matter of jurisdiction again tonight. Islam says, because that clarity must be made. And it's not just a matter of interest, it's because some of the statements you hear people making about Donald Trump indicates they don't understand jurisdiction because they don't understand what he's saying. They think he's out to lunch. He is absolutely not out to lunch. The people, for the most part, are out to lunch. Because he's saying certain things that are related to the Republic, and because they have not been operating on the Republic, logically, it makes him look like he's out to lunch. And I understand, I'm not defending him, mind you. And I'm not agreeing necessarily or disparaging or dismissing, things that he says, but I see through a lot of what he's saying because I know history and I know the politics. And again, when you start seeing people getting all upset about Donald Trump, you immediately recognize they do not know the history. They absolutely do not. They're just reacting to the controlled narrative. And that's not a defense of him. Don't get me wrong, because he's a made man too. And a temperament. So I'm not, the point of it is I'm seeking truth, not partiality. Do you understand? And I suggest you do the same. Go ahead, sis.
I have a two-part question.
Stay in the mic, please. No, when I say stay in the mic, this is what you're doing.
Oh, okay. I have a two-part question. What do we say to family members who have been lied to for so long, and now that we're bringing the truth to them, they only accepting it as a lie? And
now
the second part to this question.
Let's answer one part at a time. Because remember, you got people listening, and you got people, and people have a tendency to scatter. All right. Number one, without going any further, I already know that you're talking about Constantinian order, or people who are Christianized, or thinking Christians, including them thinking that Christian platform is a spiritual platform like other platforms, and it's the special one. It's really Constantinianism operating under the name of Christianity. If you have family members who are confused, don't platform is neither moral or ethical. It's just presented to appear that way. You got to remember most dogma systems, and it's not limited to the church. It happens in mosques, temples, synagogues, all of them. This is why you must know the fundamental truths. Knowledge is treated as the lie. Belief is treated as truth and salvation. Go be outside of the fence of belief, and you're accused of having a devil. And they shut down. This is training. Are we clear? They don't know they're under mind control. How do you approach this as a doctor and as a scholar? You don't argue with them. You give them the record of the church. Therefore, you do the research. When I say you, we're talking plural. If you're among people that are really dealing with this information, it's not hard for you to do because it's available to you. So you immediately just simply go to, as an example, the Nicene Council, 325. Right? This is the church's own record. You go to the Nicene Council and do some research, print it out, and mail it to them. Not from you, but from, like, the salvation of the order of the Church of God in Christ of Jesus. Oh, nigga. They put an offering envelope in it, too. So, well, that's what it is. Don't say it's from you. So you can't see this just because you ain't saved. And then they open up the envelope and start reading the Nicene Council. Now, if they don't get liberated then, they're black-hearted and deserve to be where they are. You gotta remember, in divine order, really, the truth belongs to everyone. But you don't want everyone around your babies when this change takes place. Because some of them will sell their babies out. Just because these people sitting around talking about Jesus, God, Allah, Moses, and Muhammad, don't give them the credit for anything divine in the order of good. Because it doesn't necessarily represent that. Not that some of the people don't intend it to be. Do you understand what I'm saying? Most of you good people will be the believers who are trying to do good, who are just involved because they're fooled, and they're just good people. But they're being played. Do you understand what I'm saying? But they don't know they're being played. Now, with the Nicene Council, when you do the research, first thing you're going to find out, as an example, let me show you as an example. This will be a perfect example for you, right? So, ordinary dictionary, right? Right? So this is a Britannica, right? And I'm going to show you how simple it is to undo a lot of this crap. And this is again why they always try to discourage our people from reading the child if they would just read, right? Now, look at this. This is short. This is not deep research, right? Right? Islam, please, thank you for much. Now, say your family member, you're trying to school them, and they're getting all emotional, because remember, they're trained to deal with emotions, right? Not facts, right? Ask the average person like this. I'm not disagreeing with you, and since you want to try to save me, you know, you're saying I need this information, I'm willing to listen. So please tell me about the Niceno-Constantinopolitan Creed, because I'm open to hear, because I want to understand. And if they get twisted in any kind of format, or their eyebrows change, the reflection in their eye changes whatsoever, you just caught them, right? So that's the first teaching for them. Why? Because the official name of Christianity in the Western Hemisphere is the Niceno-Constantinopolitan Creed. And if they don't know the official name, they're already unqualified to teach anybody any damn thing. Let's not have a discussion about it. But you don't argue that with them. You just bring these things up and let it play out. Don't challenge them, just let it play out. Just like me, that's like me telling you I'm a carpenter, right? And you hire me to fix this door, to fix this window, or do something like that, right? Meanwhile, we got contract, you paying me, you feed me and everything. Next year, you're all coming here to the House of Reawakening Mind. I'm sitting over there in the special person's chair over here and stuff. Right? You know, all that stuff. You still feed me peanut butter sandwiches, and I'm telling you, keep hope alive. You got 3 blankets on the baby now because it's still cold. Wind blowing all side pictures blowing off the wall and everything, but I'm a carpenter. Now, you start thinking, still believing I'm a carpenter, and you still been paying me, then you question, well, don't question me now, because I got this thing covered because I'm with the Lord. And after a while, there used to be 1 donkey in the house. Now there's 2 donkeys in the house. You know, then we get into, well, keep hope alive one of these days. In Jesus' time, what you don't do is question. You don't understand. And then you go get all starry-eyed and don't start giving me some more peanut butter sandwiches, right? You're out to lunch. It's like a carpenter having a debate with you whether or not a saw is a saw. It shouldn't be up for discussion. If you're a carpenter, you don't know what a saw and hammer is, you ain't a carpenter. Now, if somebody claims to be a Christian in the Western Hemisphere at all and don't know about Constantine, then they're going to tell you about the Bible, and they're going to tell you about Christianity, they're already disqualified. But let them go ahead and do their disqualification. But you let them get their stuff off. You understand? Because you don't need to argue with them. The facts will. Right? Niceno-Constantinopolitan Creed is the official name of Christianity. It's Constantine. Ain't got a damn thing to do with Jesus. Right? So let's do with basic math, right? Let's deal with child, right? So you pull a little child while these adults are sitting there debating about their salvation. And your child, let them get a pencil and paper, and then you read this from an ordinary dictionary. Right? Because child kind of confused, they ain't got no agenda. And they're not going to the Bahamas with Jesus' head, singing the choir, you know, the birth and sings the choir at the church. That's also the name of Christianity. Are we clear? Nicene Creed. A Christian doctrine, and this is adopted against the Arian heresy. So what is the Arian heresy when you do research? In the church,
Arians said they wasn't right.
huh?
Arians said that wasn't right. Their concepts wasn't right.
But Arian is not exactly what people think. They're thinking personage. Personage? Right? Right? Excuse my scribble writing. Now see that medulla mark of the gates? In the book of Revelation, you'll see 3 in the north, 3 in the east, 3 in the west, 3 in the south. Those gates, that would be these gates here in the 4 corners of the elements of Yahweh, or the 4 YHWH, which air, fire, water, and earth, right? Now, I'm a high priest, right, or Nicene, and I've exercised and mastered all the degrees. Then the gates become what is called a nimbus, right? Then would become a nimbus. And then this will be put on my head like a crown, and I'd be like this. And the only gate you would not see, and this would usually be gold colored. And then they paint pictures with this crown on my head. That's a nimbus. And you'll see many images of one they call Jesus with that nimbus around his head. And it may be 1 or 2 other figures that you may also see it smaller in certain pictures around the world. Right? And so you see 2 nostrils, right? Right? See that? 2 nostrils, 2 eyes, 2 ears, 1 mouth, 7 in the circle, that's circle 7. In the chambers of the head of the upper realm. Are we clear? The combining of all of the senses, smell, touch, taste, seeing, sight, then you have the other 2, which is insight and intuition, combined, then that combines to make that eye that you see, which is all seeing, which is also called the eye of Horus, which is the Son of God. Because now the seeing is one. So now persons who are starting to evolve like that are called prophets, psychics, seers, etc. Are we clear? On the planet. I'm just telling you what it is. Now, hold on. These are abstracts, right?
Aerial.
Of gates. Right? They are abstracts. So you're dealing with what you call the ethereal plane, right? Which people who don't really understand this will call it spirit plane. It's not exactly correct. The ethereal plane, all right? Right? Now, when you bring this to what you call the balancing, or as you say, as above, right? So below, right? And then you bind them together, and then you have hex alpha, right? Right? All right, so that would be 7 what, y'all? 2 360s are what? All right. So 7, 2, and 0 is what? Upper world, underworld. Let's bring this into what is called the aggregate, or what you call the physical plane, right? Aggregate. So you deal with the gates, right? And then because we're dealing with the physical, the bottom stem would be longer, right? Right? And then you would identify the gates. Now, this one would be longer because it would deal with the physical plane, right? And that in German, now you're dealing in the physical. So it's more apparent in the symbolism as opposed to being more abstract. In the German, and you can find this if you do research, this would be called, this symbol would be called Coptic cross. It would be called mundane. Cross. It would be called master's seal. All of those names apply to this, and in Germanic, this would be called and in your gates, this would be the north gate, right? East gate, west gate, south gate. And this is where your master priest would study the ephemerides and almanacs, etc. And this is where they would derive the news. This is where you get the term that's used around the world called news. And the narrative has always been controlled by the priesthood, whether they're negative or positive. Are we clear? So understand that the priesthoods have been controlling the world. why the priesthood is the ones that always murdered the prophets. And then blame the devil.
See, Jesus was doing good stuff and stuff. And the devil came over there and took all the sandwiches. We was having a good picnic in the Lord's house. Let me get myself together. Yeah, I love the Lord of London. And then, you see, what was happening was, God sent Jesus here to help everybody out and stuff. And then the devil came along and stuff. And then he killed Jesus and said, and hung him on the cross. And we got to raise some money to kick the devil's ass. You start that right. But the real deal of it is, the priesthood recognized that he was schooling them to the Gnostic wisdom that was really the foundation of all religion. And they were giving the people dogma and doctrine of the law. And here comes this little 12-year-old boy blowing their game. So they had it out for him from the beginning. They're going to get rid of him. So the priesthood starts slandering him, trolling him. You call it trolling now, right? Lying on him, character assassination. Oh, he's trying to take our place. Oh, he's trying to take Rome's place. So there's meeting with Rome. The priesthood was meeting with Rome, not no devil. I say, the priesthood, and plotted his death. And as a matter of fact, they delivered him to Rome. Rome knew the game. So Pontius Pilate, representing Rome, to kind of like get it off his hand and say, well, y'all want to kill this man? What for? Tell him the truth. I mean, we know we got this thing covered, but y'all sure you don't want to do that? Yeah, well, let's save Barabbas. We want to kill his ass. The priesthood, it ain't no devil. The priesthood. They delivered him and said, well, y'all can do this thing, but right now, let's get this together. Wash my hands. Because remember, the blood's on your hands, y'all. Y'all working on this, but see, we ain't doing it. Y'all doing this. You're right? Who gets blamed for all the prophets' deaths? The devil. Who really did it all the time? The priesthood. Who can recognize that? An ordinary child reading that book. Who will tell that child a lie to protect the church? The parent. To protect the image of the church and the priesthood, they will condemn anybody who tells the truth. That's what the Nicene Council was all about. Hold on, I'm going to tell you this. Aries is the beginning of the gates. Now you look this way and you're looking from earth up, and you're looking from outside coming to the earth. And so what is the Arian heresy? The heresy is those who know the truth of the church. Because the church is really the great circle of the zodiac. And it begins in the gate of Aries, called springtime, or the stars in the east. And the wise men, three, following the stars. And so these are deaconates, aren't they, y'all? So each one of these is broken down into threes, right? Aren't they?
Yeah.
Aren't they?
Yes. Islam.
And they are what? 10 degrees, aren't they? Huh?
Yes.
Huh? Aren't they? And so each one of these is 30 degrees, aren't they? Of the gates, aren't they? And they're movements of the moon, aren't they? And they call them monthlies or months. Moons, movements, right? And all of these are called deaconates, aren't they? As we get deacon in the church. And these gates are called cardinal points. This is where you get cardinal. in the church. They're all master astrologers. They're all MAs, aren't they? Now in them chambers, and you see them putting a button on your turban right there with the MA on it, it don't just mean Moorish American. It means master alchemist, and it also means master astrologer. Yes, it does.
Oh, wait.
Now I ask you, have most people been ever taken to the church? I say no. Now, so the priesthood called this heresy. And anybody who knew this knowledge, they called them what? Heretics, and began murdering them. Look at the history. And even when they were doing the Nicene Council, what did they do? They murdered the bishops and the priests who would not go along with them altering the books out of their original tongues and out of their original culture. And they murdered them. That term is referred to this day as casting out the window. Provable fact. This is for your family members who think they're Christians. Not knowing there's a political system, right? So, the Christian confession of faith adopted against the Arian heresy by the First Council of Nicaea, AD 325. So that means 325 after they assassinated the one they called Jesus. So what does he have to do with this council meeting? A child can count that, can't they? That's like us, me and you, having a discussion on George Washington and Lafayette near Trenton, New Jersey, on their iPhone 10s, discussing how they're going to win the war at Gettysburg. And the people buying it. So here's the priesthood making up the Christian creed, which is the Nicene Creed, at a council meeting, 325. And the reverend's telling people that Jesus brought this out of a cloud of glory for you to adopt, and if you don't go along with this, you're going to die and go to hell. And this is your only way to life, is through this creed. And this is where that arrogance comes from. From the popes of Rome, ain't got a damn thing with no Jesus, no Muhammad, and no damn body else. This is their own record in an ordinary dictionary, and a child can count that. But how many adults support this without question and promote it knowing it's a fraud? It's not an issue whether it's good or bad. That's not even the argument. It's not even an issue whether you accept it or not. That's not even the argument. The argument is clearly a fraud. And the workings of the priesthood in private meetings where they murdered people who wouldn't go along with it. Not only that, it is a similar creed later attributed to the Council of Constantinople, AD, in 381, and accepted by the Greek church and called Constantinopolitan or Niceno-Constantinopolitan Creed. That's the official name. So how many of these people go in these churches even know that that's the official name of Christianity that they keep saying is the Jesus that the book keep telling them is a Jew? Which itself is a contradiction. Now, this is only a paragraph. It's an ordinary dictionary. I mean, and yet, these people are paid millions of dollars every week and collect Roman tax called the tithe, which you can research was set up by Pope Sylvester II. For paying off the Roman priesthood. And they lie and say it's for Jesus. And lie and say that Jesus got a bank account at Chase Manhattan, or whatever local community. They even have ATM machines in these buildings now. And use guilt trip and subterfuge to get these people to part with their widow's pennies to give to the Lord. And they call that truth? Now, I'm not talking about criticism. It's not criticism. We're talking about the evidence, the math, the fact, not debatable. But you need to do the research on the Nicene Council and how many people were murdered while they were altering their books. Don't try to convince them, give them these people's own records with a contribution envelope, because they like to do that. All right, we got to go, y'all. I said, but give the sister a mic.
The second part of the question was, a lot of them are good at their jobs for 15, 20 years.
I don't care how many years there's in it.
Well, they said if they do this transition, what happens to their pensions? Do they?
You keep doing like this. Stay in the mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. What happens to their pensions?
Stay in the mic.
What happens to their pensions if they stay?
Not if they stay.
I'm sorry.
It doesn't matter whether they stay or not. They ain't going to get it. See, the real deal, if you really pay attention to these people, they're bought off, and that's what they need to admit. They're submitting to Rome because they're looking for cookies. They're taking the payoff. In another word, it would be called the few pieces of silver to sell out justice, or the few pieces of silver to sell out Jesus. They don't know it's talking about them. Meaning that if you remove the cookies and the promises, most of them would dump this stuff overnight because they know it's BS. But it's something to do. And then the other deal of it is they keep confusing the nature of humans. So they can sing, so they can sing and do all this good stuff. And they confuse that with spirituality. They ain't got nothing to do. That's just good people coming together with a good brotherhood and fellowship. And it ain't nothing wrong with that. The deal of it is you got this parasite, con artist, interjecting himself in the middle of it, pretending he's teaching spirituality and raping them. And calling the joy of their coming together spirituality. That's where the problem is. Ain't nothing wrong with them coming together. Problem is they ain't never been taken to the church. They don't know that the church is Germanic and it means the great circle. And no one's ever taught them the circle. You know, so these are the things that need to be straightened out. But once these things are straightened out, they would leave their buildings anyway because they recognize that these people are con artists. Meaning that we could take a lesson and just give you a lesson on the great church. And the average person that go to those places called churches wouldn't even recognize what we were talking about, but they would recognize the symbols. But if you explain the symbols, you understand, and show their origin, you would immediately show them that they're being played with. And then as soon as they try to disprove you, they would educate themselves. So that's why people don't want this information out, because institutions will collapse, because they're built on lies. This is why the world is in trouble, because it's the dark priesthood who's really been ruling. Not no Satan, it's these dark priests. They did this to humanity, and they have not been charged. And people have done research and seen it, and still won't charge them. Keep charging some mystical devil. You see the shadow, see, because when you got your iPhone on at 2 o'clock, and you see you cast a shadow like that and start going like this. And Shriners and all these guys, all of them have amongst them the priesthood who've been ruling the planet. Skull and Bones Illuminati is not the organizations, is within the organizations where the dark priesthood have set their root and they've been ruling the world. And you have been the food. And that's the truth. Give this brother Mike. And we're going to roll. Go ahead, Dr. Nailah. Yeah, I got in. Yeah.
What he was talking about.
Can I just
get the mic?
Yeah, with regard to people, who are in church, Christianity, and so forth, and making a transition. True, what he said. Just present the truth, and I feel like if people are going to awaken, they will awaken eventually. With regard to pensions and things like that, I'm assuming you mean nationalizing, and how would that affect if they're getting a pension and nationalized, they're going to keep getting a pension until pensions are gone for everybody, then it won't matter whether you're nationalized or not. You see what I'm saying? I'm nationalized and I got a pension. But if it goes away, my nationalization is not going to keep something that's no longer exists.
Exactly.
So they're better off being in propria persona.
Because this is what the
They're
issue
not.
is. This is what they're saying, really what they're saying. Because what they're admitting to, and this is what it is. See, because if you're psychic, or if you're a seer, as soon as they start talking, you already know where they're coming from. If I stop serving Rome, Rome is not going to give me no peanut butter sandwiches. Now, I don't want to admit, and I don't want you to recognize that Rome is my God. So let's not go there. I don't want to upset my God, because my God will take my food, my pension, my 401k will become a 409k. And so therefore, and I know the history of Rome of hurting people who don't submit. So will I lose my benefits if I tell the truth and honor my mothers and fathers? That's really what they're saying. See, but the conversation doesn't go like that. Do you understand? When you examine what the questions that I know you're telling the truth, but I serve Rome. I know you're telling the truth, but Rome will get me if I stop serving Rome. So if I declare my nationality, which means if I honor my mothers and my fathers, will they steal my estate? Because they've been stealing our estates. These is what those questions are really geared around. And we want to allow them to have their dignity so we don't call them on it that way. But the real deal is, when you're talking to these people, you start seeing, see, because when man unfolds, his God unfolds. When you listen to the conversation, they ain't serving no Jesus, they ain't serving no God, no Allah, no Yahweh. Their organizations, 90% of them got 501c3s behind them. And they themselves are scared of the truth, not because in private they won't agree with you, because they will. They'll start saying, well, they'll take my stuff, which means they're telling you who their God really is. Now, you love them because they're family and stuff like that, so you want to give them the benefit of the doubt. But let's get over it. In the real world, and what is on us now with the Korean lights, she does not recognize personal station. And I'll close with saying this. There will be two in the field. One will be taken, and the other will be left. If your right arm offends you, get that penknife, that razor blade, the double-edged blade, whatever, that butter knife, and sharpen that boy and cut that sucker off while you can. So you don't go down with it. Because whoever's serving Rome is going down with Rome. And with that, I say have a grand evening. Thank you for coming out to the house of Reawakening Minds.
Thank you for coming out here tonight to the House of Reawakening Minds. I want to remind you that we are here every Friday with a civics class. Next Friday, we will have Brother Abdullah El-Talib Mosi Bey, and on Sunday, that's the 11th, Sunday the 13th, we'll have Brother Sabir Bey. 3 p.m. on Sunday. Grand Sheik, I think, will be here too on the 13th, but this is Brother Sabir will be given an overview of his time in Spain or Andalus, Al-Andalus on next Sunday at 3 p.m. So we want you to come out and be a part of that.
And also he has a series where he shares information called Sabir the Traveling Moor.
Right, so he will be here on next Sunday at 3 p.m.
And also I'll update you all later because his brother is doing a play, and Hawthorne James will be in Philly, and he already called
Saturday, right?
Yeah, he wants to touch base with me. He's the one that played Big Red in the movie Temptation. Remember that?
He played the stick-up kids.
So I'll be giving him some information and some literature and stuff like that.
Well, thank you for coming out, and
I'll tell y'all when the play comes, if y'all want to come to the play, and if y'all want to meet him, I'll take you backstage and do what we do. All right?
Thank you so much, and have
All right.
safe travels.
Peace and Rena. I'll take this one of these.